Welcome to Chronicon, the first 3,000 years, 5239 BC, the Nemesis Cataclysm, to the Great Flood, 2239 BC. This is Before the Flood, Chronicon Volume 1, an audiobook reading by Nick T.
Chronicon, Archive 1, Before the Flood, 5239 to 2239 BCE, 3,000 years covered in 98 date entries in 39 pages. Original research unpublished, all rights reserved, Jason M. Bresciers, 2017. Chronicon, 5239 BC. 5239 BC, or minus 1344 AM, 7344 before Armageddon, 3000 before Flood, 1 Anunnaki chronology. This year begins the great year system of 600-year periods so popular among ancient chroniclers. It represents the beginning of Earth's geometrical timelines, the start of Anunnaki chronology, counting 2448 years 3 times over, 7344 years, until the Anunnaki are destroyed in 2106 AD by the chief cornerstone at Armageddon, when their power over mankind is broken. In 5239 BC, the original solar system is a differential binary system with a bright and smaller luminary, 2 stars with the smaller orbiting the larger. The smaller star was known as the day star, having a series of planets orbiting it. These were a gigantic planet known to the Sumerians as Nibiru, a planet called Phoenix by ancient civilizations in our own world, Earth. There may have been more. During this period, the other luminary, a bright star at night, because of the extreme distance between the sister stars, provided a soft blue illumination at night, and also had orbiting it the planets we are familiar with today. Planets that have never ceased orbiting it: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Electra, now the asteroid belt, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Our planet Earth was not a part of this luminary system until later, the result of a solar system cataclysm. The 2 suns served as the greater light to serve the day and the lesser light to serve the night, as found in Genesis through this ancient fragment incorporated into the later Genesis writings, has been mistaken with that of the moon. By this time, the world we call Earth is very old, with the heavens filled with brilliant stars attesting to its antiquity. Starlight is an image of prehistoric heaven, not an accurate visual representation of our universe extant in real time. On Earth, prehistoric flora and fauna flourish under pristine biospheric conditions. The Anunnaki are the builders, co-creators with the Eternal One, also called Watchers, sons of God, angels, and they are appointed to act as teachers and guardians over a sentient race of beings that they had made, a civilization antedating the creation of Homo sapiens, humanity. In this year, the Anunnaki sealed their fate in planning or starting designs deemed as rebellious to the Eternal One. He who fears the Anunnaki will lengthen his days. 1. Babylonian inscription in Religion of Egypt and Assyria, page 389, cited in Sargon the Magnificent 104. 4687 BC, minus 7092 AM, 607092 before Armageddon, 2448 before Flood, 552 Anunnaki chronology. The Anunnaki homeworld is called Nibiru, an immense planet orbiting both stars. The calendrics for this year denote that something momentous occurred on Nibiru within Anunnaki society. The space-time periods of disaster align in this year. Nibiru's orbit is 792 years, and this year is 6,000 plus 792 years before Armageddon. This is 2448 years before the Great Flood, the number 2448 being the ancient Egyptian sum representing disaster, cataclysm, as will be seen in this chronology. This is the year 552 of the Anunnaki chronology, 552 years being a phoenix cycle known to the ancients as a period of time between catastrophes. Nibiru and planet Phoenix both orbit the day star and travel along its ecliptic toward the other luminary 4 billion miles away. They approach from the south of the system, where Mercury and the other planet orbit along their own ecliptic path. These differential ecliptic planes, solar equators, formed an ecliptic cross that intersects exactly where Earth orbits this star today. The day star, Nibiru, Phoenix and Earth were in deep southern space underneath the solar system we call home today. This region of space to the south was known to the Sumerians as Apsu, the abyss or deep. The original 6 signs of the zodiac were viewed from this vantage point, when Earth travelled a completely different ecliptic around the Sun's ancient sister star, formerly aligned with the galactic plane. The star patterns of the zodiac do not fit their symbolic counterparts because the origin of the zodiac antedates Earth's present position. Because Nibiru orbited both suns, it was called by the Sumerians as the ferry and the planet of the crossing. Interestingly, the width of the subterranean chamber below the Great Pyramid is exactly 552 pyramid inches. 4639 BC, minus 744 AM, 6744 before Armageddon, 2400 before Flood, and 600 Anunnaki chronology. The Eternal One permitted the Anunnaki access to the records of heaven, known also as the Tablets of Destinies or Tables of Heaven, archives concerning ancient heaven and the annals of the future, but they were admonished that they would be responsible for all they knew. The wise among the angelic hosts chose obedience and life, seeking no more than what they were inspired to learn. But others, by diligent research into the future, discovered that the Godhead would one day create his own human, not by the agency of divine fire as were made the Anunnaki, but out of inferior clay. A third of the hosts of the Anunnaki took offence when they further discovered that this newer being, made of mundane materials, would actually play host to the eternal spirit of the living God, that man would become repositories of the Holy Spirit, the spiritual image of God. As the first being created, the firstborn, the offended Anunnaki, initiated the Daystar Rebellion and quit their services to their own pre-Adamic creations. The insurgents now blasphemously required themselves to be worshipped and began teaching their creations forbidden knowledges and the sciences of hybridization, arcane secrets that were to remain only within the order of the Watchers. The Anunnaki homeworld fomented war between the planets of the Daystar. Nibiru and Earth participated in this war, but if other worlds were involved is not known. The Daystar planetary system began to lose its order, and the brilliance of the Daystar began to wane. The sophisticated civilizations built by the Anunnaki for their creations were ruined, and cities used advanced weapons against one another. As the Anunnaki readied themselves for a great war, colonies of pre-Adamites were sent out to mine materials from other planets, uninhabited and moons. It was their intent to prepare for the coming of man, so they could eliminate the threat as soon as mankind emerged. As this year is precisely 744 years prior to the beginning of mankind's 6,000 years of banishment that began in 3895 BC, this year reflects the existence of the old Daystar in the Genesis text, where we find the passage, 2 great lights, being 744, their geometrical value. 1. Stones and the scarlet thread, 36. 4309 BC, minus 414 AM, 6414 before Armageddon, 2070 before Flood, 930 Anunnaki chronology, 1 Phoenix chronology. After 330 years of revolt and war, the 33.3% of the Anunnaki who rebelled and enslaved the pre-Adamites were pronounced guilty by the Word, known to the builders as the chief cornerstone, excommunicated from their divine appointments. Their ranks and stations in the heavens, government of the Eternal One, were left abandoned, but their sentence was postponed. Judgment delayed and was only to be executed once the number of their fallen positions were filled by those they sought to unjustly slay, mankind. The Daystar went out, the luminary becoming dark after exploding and folding in on itself as a compressed star or frozen star. In astronomical parlance, it became a dark star. Those planets nearest it were obliterated and have since filled the Kuiper belt with detritus, the origin of those mysterious anomalies of rock and ice and dust we call comets. The outer world were hurled through space toward the surviving luminary, the star we call our Sun. Nibiru drifted into a 792-year orbit, 732 years below the ecliptic and 60 years above the ecliptic plane, an orbit that would continue perfectly until 2106 AD, the year of Armageddon. Phoenix was totally destroyed and entered into a 138-year orbit over the Sun, spending much of its journey far out in the Kuiper belt. Earth in this year began drifting toward the Sun and would not enter its present orbit for 270 years. The Earth completely frozen, the oceans solid ice. This lifeless drift is found in the Babylonian Enuma Elish text as, "Long were the days, years were added." The outer layers of the day star were ejected out into space to bombard its own planetary system, and then heavily damaged the planets and moons of our current solar system. After the initial explosion, the internal core imploded and collapsed, this phenomenon changing it to become something between a black hole and a neutron star. Astrophysicists assert that after a star explodes and loses much of its mass, its gravitational influence plummets, and the system loses its outer planets which are hurled into space. The Babylonian Enuma Elish texts, copied from older Sumerian documents, read that Earth was originally from the deep abyss south of present position orbiting Sun. This early cosmological text records an ancient solar system cataclysm involving destruction of planets and their rearrangement. The Earth and its orbit, motion, constellations of the zodiac ecliptic plane, as now seen from Earth, were not established until the fifth tablet, when the Moon began orbiting Earth and it was ordained to determine the days. Amazingly, planet Phoenix's 45th visitation through the inner solar system was in 1902 AD, when immense dust clouds and mud reigned all over the world, the same year when the Babylonian cuneiform Enuma Elish records were translated into English and published with full photos of the ancient texts in an exhaustive work by L.K. King at London by Luzac and Co. The Gnostic text on the origin of the world, discovered in 1945 AD, reads that Phoenix was a witness against the powers of darkness, against the angels, and that it would endure until the consummation, the end. Phoenix was a witness in the heavens, just as are the sun and moon, identifying it as a celestial body. The phoenix appears as a sign of what will occur in the end times, when the sun will darken and moon cease shining, the oceans become agitated and chaos erupt. This refers to the sixth seal of Revelation, when planet Phoenix transits darkening the sun, initiating a pole shift in the year 2040 AD. This 4309 BC cataclysm reflected in the Gnostic text Trimorphic Protonoia, which shows that the gods, Anunnaki, were made fearful because their body of ascent, planet, was destroyed by a thunder in the deep, southern space, caused by a great fire that overturned their thrones, planets called thrones by the ancients. These archons, lords of time, planetary motion, said, "Our entire habitation has been shaken, and the entire circuit of our path of ascent, orbit, has been met with destruction, and the path upon which we go." This text depicts an orbit altered. Mystic traditions published in the Holy Tablets, which cite thousands of references to Sumerian and ancient Near East texts, claim that the world was inhabited before Adam, but was destroyed when a dust cloud hid the sun and meteorites fell upon the earth. This ruination is why Genesis reads, "And there was darkness over the face of the deep." At this time in 4309 BC, most of the Anunnaki were trapped upon their own homeworld, Nibiru, but others were trapped upon a lunar body called the Dark Satellite. Both Nibiru and the Dark Satellite will directly bear upon the course of human history, as they near the Earth and the Anunnaki are able to travel between the two for short periods. The entire interplanetary civilization built by the Anunnaki is destroyed, including the animals they had made that we refer to as dinosaurs, gigantic reptilian and amphibian life forms that flourished on Earth when Earth orbited the day star. Frozen, solid and flooded, the entire planet became a fossil, and the Eternal One cursed the Anunnaki to assume the physical forms of their own creations. When the Anunnaki appear on Earth, they appear as reptilian or amphibian, with large eyes and sickly bodies. The calendrics for this year are intriguing. As this is 930 Anunnaki chronology, it parallels the age of Adam, who died in his 930th year. 930 is the product of 792 and 138. The orbital periods of Nibiru and Phoenix. Folklorist Elsie Christensen studied ancient European calendrical systems and determined that the year 4311 BC began a calendar, the zodiacal age of the bull. This is a very amazing finding, for 4311 BC is only 2 years variance from 4309 BC. In context of over 63 centuries, Christensen's calculation is virtually precise. 1. New Worlds in the Cosmos. 3. Enuma Elish. 5. The Nag Hammadi Library. 7. The Holy Tablets, 176, page 5. 4291 BC minus 396 AM, 6396 before Armageddon, 2052 before Flood, 948 Anunnaki chronology, 18 Phoenix chronology. Nibiru enters the inner solar system 18 years after destruction of Daystar and binary system in 4309 BC. Nibiru, over 8 times the mass of Earth, catapults the frozen Earth toward the Sun, which it will begin to orbit in 252 years, positioned between the orbits of Venus and Mars. This year is 396 years before man's banishment in 3895 BC, 396 being half the orbit of Nibiru's 792 years. Later, the Anunnaki will descend and rule over mankind, but this dynasty will end violently 2052 years later at the Great Flood, mirroring the future year of 2052 AD, when the Anunnaki's 7 kings begin their rulership of post-apocalyptic Earth. 4291 BC is 6336 years, 792 times 8, before the Anunnaki invasion in 2046 AD as described in the Revelation text. This year is 4320 years, that's 1080 times 4, before the start of the chief cornerstone's ministry in 30 AD, the one who is called Christ. Nibiru ascends out of the deep, passes over the sun's ecliptic, and begins its 60-year journey north of the sun. 4236 BC, minus 341 AM. This is the scholarly accepted start date for the Egyptian long chronology 1. This is only 73 years after pre-Adamic destruction of Earth. 1. Civilizational barbarism. 4321 BC minus 336 AM, 6336 before Armageddon, 1992 before Flood, 1008 Anunnaki chronology, 78 Phoenix chronology. Nibiru exits the inner solar system after 60 years north of the ecliptic on a highly elliptical orbit. This is 6336 years, or 792 times 8, before the chief cornerstone vanquishes the Anunnaki in 2106 AD at Armageddon. 4171 BC, minus 276 AM, 6276 before Armageddon, 1932 before Flood, 1068 Anunnaki chronology, 138 Phoenix chronology. Planet Phoenix enters the inner system, completing its 138-year orbit, passing through the system on its way back to the Kuiper belt. Earth is not yet orbiting the Sun, but is still lost in space and 132 years away from assuming an orbit between Venus and Mars. 4104 BC, minus 208 AM. In 222 AD, Diogenes Laertius wrote that the Egyptians claimed that their histories spanned back 48,863 years from Alexander the Great. This is a lunar code that is interpreted by dividing the sun by 13 lunar months. Counting from 345 BC, this places the start date at 4104 BC, but counting from 331 BC, when Alexander defeated the Persians, then the date would be 4089 BC. 1. Secret Cities of Old South America 56. 4039 BC, minus 144 AM, 6144 before Armageddon, 1800 before Flood, 1200 Anunnaki chronology, 270 Phoenix chronology, 1 orbital chronology. Planet Earth drifts into the solar system after 270 years frozen solid, free of the dark star's gravitational hold. Earth begins to orbit the Sun tucked unusually between the orbits of Venus and Mars, which disrupts the equidistant mathematical distribution of the planets as measured from the surface of the Sun, revealed in the Titius-Bode law. Earth's distance from the Sun reveals that it is an intruder planet. The planets already orbiting the Sun were priorly damaged by detritus from the explosion of the Daystar. At this time there are Anunnaki on Earth and they are participant in Earth's renovation. Ancient Akkadian cosmology has the Moon pre-existing the Sun, 1. This is confirmed in the Egyptian Turin Papyrus 2, and Mexican traditions claim that Venus existed before the sun. 3. The earliest known Sumerian tablets, circa 3500 BC, recall that when the gods called the Anunnaki came to Earth, they found it covered in a dense cloud cover. Daylight did not shine. Moonlight had not emerged. 4. Amazingly, according to the Vedic Rig Veda, the proximity of a heat source to a water-covered world was what brought Earth back to life. 5. Once in orbit around the hot sun, the Earth began to roll, what we term a rotational spin on its axis, as found in Genesis 1, where the evening and the morning were the first day. This spinning begins the rapid renovation of Earth as it thaws out. Billions of marine, amphibian and reptilian life forms emerged from their dormant stasis after the world had been quick frozen 270 years earlier. The Anunnaki create humankind at the end of a 600-year period, according to the writings in the Holy Tablets. 6. This conforms nicely to the 600-year periods of the Anunnaki chronology. In fact, it was long ago taught that a divine man would arise every 600 years throughout world history. 7. As will be shown, several famous figures throughout history were born at these intervals. Mankind, according to the Enuma Elish, was created in the 6th tablet. 8. Just as in Genesis, humans were made in the 6th day. The start of man in this year is encoded in the first verse of Genesis, which reads, "In the beginning," the word beginning derived from a root, kedem, which has the geometrical value of 144, carrying with it the idea of eternalness. 9. This year of 4039 BC is 144 years before mankind is banished from paradise, walled enclosure, called Eden. In 3895 BC, which begins a 6,000-year timeline to man's redemption in 2106 AD, with the return of the chief cornerstone. Homo sapiens sapiens is a genetically improved creation by the Anunnaki from pre-existing life forms made extinct in the cataclysm of 4309 BC. But this time the Eternal One, through his word, intervened and breathed the Spirit into mankind, thus making humanity in the image of God, thus taking away the total control of the Anunnaki, who sought to create a planetary slave race of workers. For this reason, the Anunnaki as watchers have regarded their own maker, the Eternal One, as a thief. Humanity would have the knowledge necessary to discern between good and evil. The only command given to humanity is, "Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth." It is this statement that reveals that Earth was formerly inhabited. Man's creation in 6th day denotes his appearance after a period of 144 hours or 6 days. The week was by divine appointment not represented by mechanical time, 7 days. The Great Pyramid's surface sloping angle with its casing blocks in place was precisely 51 degrees 51 minutes, which matches geometrically the true length of the year in Sabbaths, 7-day periods. The year is 51.51 weeks at this time, being 360 days. The year will remain 360 days in length until another disaster in 713 BC, which alters Earth's orbit to 365.25 days. This year of 4039 BC begins Earth's orbital chronology, a timeline of our planet discovered by David Davidson in the geometrical measurements between the Great Pyramid's 4 cornerstones, and published in his enormous book, The Great Pyramid, Its Divine Message, published in 1924 AD. Davidson declares that the astronomical chronology in the Great Pyramid's measurements began in 4040 BC and ends in 2045 AD, which would be the end of a timeline involving our planet. He is only 1 year off 4039 BC and 2046 AD. Davidson knew nothing about Nibiru or about Earth being an intruder planet. As will be found in this research, in 2046 AD, Earth will be moved away from its current orbital path around the Sun, and this transposition will alter the length of the day and year. The Great Pyramid's orbital chronology measures the 6084 years between 4039 BC and 2046 AD that Earth remains in a stable orbit along the Sun's ecliptic. It will not remain here. 1. Gerald Massey Lectures 119. 4. Flying Serpent and Dragons. 5. History in Quotations 25. 6. The Oxford Illustrated Companion 104. The Holy Tablets. The Shabbat, the 7. The Christ Conspiracy 338, 9 Beginnings, The Sacred Design 172. 4033 BC, minus 138 AM, planet Phoenix enters the inner system, completing its 138-year orbit, passing through the system on its way back out to the Kuiper belt. This was 6 years or 72 months after the appearance of man, counting 1656 months, 414 times 4, or 138 years to man's banishment from Eden in 3895 BC. 6,000 years of man's banishment. 3895 BC, 1 AM. In man's 144th year in the walled enclosure, paradise, a chief among the Anunnaki watchers, a seeing one, or interpreter called a serpent in Genesis, misleads mankind into doubting the word of the Eternal One. Humanity in Eden had been given the discretion to live free from doubt and constraints, but by listening to the interpreter, mankind fell under the power of those that defined for them good and evil. Once mankind's eyes were opened, sinister intent of the Anunnaki, humanity was no longer beyond good and evil, and was from that point onward a slave to their own conscientiousness. Now his conscience, his guide, mankind is cursed to condemn himself. With their eyes opened, according to a Gnostic text, the first humans saw their makers. They loathed them since they were beastly forms. This supports the finding that the Anunnaki were changed by the Eternal One to mirror their original creations, the reptiles and amphibians of the prehistoric period. Man is cursed and sent out into the earth for 6,000 years until the return of the chief cornerstone, who the builders Anunnaki rejected. The 6,000 years will be reconfirmed in several astonishing ways in this research. The 6,000th year is 2106 AD, the exact year that Nibiru, the Anunnaki homeworld, will pass close to Earth on its way back out of the inner solar system. Banished into the wild, mankind attempts to go back to the walled enclosure, but the appearance of a fiery flaming sword prevents this, held by an angelic guardian. The account has promoted much confusion. Celestial bodies like comets and unknown planets that gave off tails in the sky were referred to as swords, as seen in Scripture, in the writings of Josephus and Pliny too. In this year, planet Phoenix entered the inner solar system, completing its 138-year orbit, passing through the system on its way back to the Kuiper belt. It is the visual appearance of planet Phoenix that signalled the start of the 6,000-year timeline and set in stone the association in antiquity between comets and celestial bodies and judgment on Earth, which will culminate until Phoenix initiates an apocalyptic event darkening the sun in 2040 AD and initiating a pole shift disaster that is referred in Revelation as the Sixth Seal. Another name for the Phoenix was Typhon, a name preserving Phone X as seen in Typhon. Plutarch relates that Typhon was reddish, and Massey wrote that the ancients wrote a lot about a celestial body with a red tail. 3. The palm tree long ago was a symbol of the reckoning of time, and in Hebrew the palm is phenis, with ancient roots resolving to pho-en-x, or one great fire. 4. The palm branch was a symbol for time and periodicity. Horapollo wrote that it was adopted as a symbol for the month. Time was reckoned by plucking off the shoots on a palm branch. 5. In Assyria, the palm tree was the tree of life, also identifiable as a flaming column, and it is found often encoiled by a serpent. The palm phoenix merges all of these concepts. 6. Phoenix is the planet of chronology. That Adam was 144 years old when banished is reflected in the Kabbalistic tradition, and he is assigned the number 1447. Adam in Hebrew is ADM. The A has a value of 1, the D is 4, and M is 40, but 0 has no value. The sum of Adam is thus 144. In old Assyrian and Akkadian tablets, the word Adam is found used as a proper name. The curse humanity suffers is elaborated on by the prophet Ezekiel, who wrote that the 4 judgments God employs against mankind to curb sin and rebellion throughout world history are sword, famine, plague, and wild beasts. This year begins the 1948 year countdown to the birth of Abraham, who will father many nations. This 1947 BC birth counts another 1948 years to 1 AD, the start of a whole different calendrical system. In the 1948th year of this new Anno Domini calendar, the nation of Israel will be re-established. Additionally, this is the year 1344 Anunnaki chronology. 1344 a product of 792 and 552. Nibiru's orbit is 792 years, and Phoenix cycles dreaded in antiquity were 552 years, or 4 orbits of 138 years each. In the year 1860 AD, W. Morgan calculated the Druid precessional system, which began when the equinox occurred in the first point of Taurus, his calculation being 3903 BC. This is an amazing feat, for in over 57.5 centuries, Morgan was only 8 years off. After extensive research of the biblical records, the Book of Jasher and Assyrian Eponyms, chronologist Stephen Jones in his Secrets of Time published that this year, 3895 BC, was year 1, so highly regarded by the ancient world. This 6,000-year timeline had nothing to do with the creation, but is a fixed astronomical chronology that began with the appearance of planet Phoenix in 3895 BC, the first time humans witnessed it, and ends in 2106 AD, when planet Nibiru exits the solar system. The geometrical framework of world history unfolds within the perimeters of the visitations of these two intruder planets. 1. Flying serpents and dragons. 2. Josephus, Jewish War on 70 AD. Pliny, Chronicles. Revelation. 3. Gerald Massey Lectures. 4. Lost Language of Symbolism. 7. The Knights Templar in the New World. 8. The Rosicrucian Cosmo-Conception. 9. Sargon the Magnificent. 10. Ezekiel. 11. St. Paul in Britain. 3880 BC, 15 AM. According to the ancient book of Jasher, Cain and Abel were twins, Cain slaying Abel when they were 15 years of age. This story immortalised the worldwide legends of the twins always at war with another. By this time, Sheva, Eve, had 2 or 3 more children, daughters. Abel was the firstborn and first murdered human, foreshadowing the atonement of the Messiah in the person of Christ, also called Shiloh. This was 3880 years to the start of the Anno Domini calendar, year of the Lord, and the geometrical value for Shiloh is 3880. 3765 BC, 1:30 AM. As humankind rapidly multiplies, Seth is born, chosen by God to carry on the messianic bloodline and be the future patriarch of the Sethites who construct the Great Pyramid complex at Akhuzan, Giza. Adam and Eve had many other children. 1. Antiquities of the Jews. 3757 BC, 1:38 AM. Planet Phoenix passes through the inner solar system on its 138-year orbit of the Sun on its way back to the Kuiper Belt. 3725 BC, 1:70 AM. At 40 years old, Seth begins ruling over the Adamites, establishing a kingdom. The early Egyptians venerated him as Set, and only late in Egyptian antiquity as newer gods came in vogue was Seth, demonized, falling into disrepute. The Sethite kingdom and centre of pre-flood civilization was in Egypt. 3671 BC, 224 AM, and 1 Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar begins from the years that have passed since the counting of years began, 1. This was the 54th year of the reign of Seth. This calculation could be the result of rabbinical error, or Seth could have instituted a calendar in his 54th year. There is calendrical evidence that this begin date for a timeline was intentional. 1. Flying serpents and dragons. 3619 BC, 276 AM. Planet Phoenix passes through the inner solar system on its 138 years orbit on its way back out to the Kuiper Belt. 3615 BC, 280 AM. Mankind begins falling away from the teaching of Seth and Adam, beginning to worship the creation rather than the Creator. This completes 7 generations, a generation being 40 years. Prior to this time there was virtually no strife or crime, and this period is remembered in the Japanese Way of the Gods traditions. The account is recorded by Josephus in Antiquities. 3530 BC, 365 AM or Annus Mundi. Canaan, son of Enosh, begins ruling the Adamites at age 40, ending Seth's reign of 195 years. Canaan is wise and knowledgeable, famous for his power over spirits and demons. He was troubled by premonitions of a future disaster, the drowning of the entire world. 1 Jasher 2:11. 349 BC or 396 AM. The Anunnaki planet Nibiru enters the inner solar system for the first time in human memory, emerging from southern space to begin its 60-year pass north of the ecliptic plane to finish its 792-year orbit. Nibiru is inhabited. 3481 BC or 414 AM. Planet Phoenix passes through the inner system 18 years after Nibiru passed over the ecliptic in the inner system. Both planets travel along the dark star's ecliptic between Venus and Earth. Phoenix continues on its 138-year orbit back into the Kuiper belt. This is the 49th year of the reign of Canaan. 3468 BC, 427 AM. Chinese traditional date of the birth of a prophet named Fu Ke, who foretold of the coming of a saviour. This anachronism may refer to Enoch, who was born 195 years later. 1. The Secret Doctrine. 3439 BC, 456 AM. Nibiru completes its 792-year orbit after passing for 60 years over the ecliptic north of the Sun's position, and passes dangerously close to Earth. The Jasher records reads, "And in the days of Enosh the Lord caused the waters of the Gihon to overwhelm them, and he destroyed and consumed them, and he destroyed a third part of the earth, and there was no food for the sons of men, and the famine was very great." In those days, Hebrew tradition hold that there was many earthquakes, drought and famine in the days of Enosh, and in the Jewish Haggadah text we find that this flood in Enosh's day occurred before the famous flood of Noah. The Yazidis of Asia preserve traditions of a flooding more ancient than Noah's, stating that the world was flooded twice, the second flood by far the worst. Moses Maimonides wrote that in the days of Enosh, men began to build temples to the host of heaven, venerating the stars as deities, and the Old One, the Creator over time, was forgotten. The worship of the Anunnaki from the stars, called Watchers, is the theme of the older portions of the Book of Enoch. The Greeks remembered the Anunnaki as Anidoti, who were believed to have descended to Earth at 4 different times long ago, interacting with men. The Holy Tablets, fragments borrowed from Sumerian and Babylonian texts, indicate that the Anunnaki were imprisoned on Nibiru, but were able to get to Earth after a 60-year period. In the Book of Enoch, it was 200 watchers that came down to Earth, and their leader, Azazel, was guilty of disclosing to the world of all the secret things which are done in the heavens. Zechariah Sitchin remarks in his The Wars of Gods and Men that Sumerian texts over and over refer to a starting point in the Chronicles of the Anunnaki that began 432,000 years before the deluge. Sitchin cites a text excavated from the ruins of Sumer concerning the descent of a god named Enki to Earth at that time, which reads, "When I approached Earth there was much flooding." Sitchin's research confirms this 3439 BC date as the descent of the Anunnaki to Earth. In his End of Days book he relates that the Sumerian writings claim that the Anunnaki appeared on Earth when Nibiru orbited close to our planet 432,000 years before the Great Flood. But this 432,000 years is a mistranslation, commonly done with ancient Near East texts, for these are not 432,000 years, but 432,000 days, precisely 1200 years of 360 days each. As seen in this chronology, the Great Flood date is fixed by the Phoenix orbit and is exactly 1200 years before this descent of the Anunnaki in 3439 BC. In Hamlet's Mill by Giorgio di Santillana and Hertha von Dechend, we see that the number of 432,000 seems to be where science and myth merge, this number significant in the mythological systems around the world. The architecture of the Great Pyramid demonstrates this date of 3439 BC. Astronomer Royal for Scotland, Charles Piazzi Smythe, in the 1870s, during his research on site at the Great Pyramid, determined for unknown reasons that the descendant passage of the structure which goes all the way below the pyramid pointed directly at Alpha Draconis, the eye of the dragon, in 3440 BC, the pre-flood pole star. This is only a one-year variance from 3439 BC. This assessment was later reconfirmed by Davidson in his mammoth book in 1924, The Great Pyramid, Its Divine Message. The Anunnaki bound themselves with a mutual curse, accepting that they were adding more judgments upon themselves when they planned to teach mankind all the forbidden knowledges and sciences. When they appear among men, they are rejected by the Sethite survivors, but are taken in by the Cainites, who give them their daughters in exchange for their aid and knowledges. The Watchers taught mankind herbalism, sorcery, incantations, power over evil spirits, ghosts of pre-Adamic people, and the Watchers fathered hybrids that grew to astonishing sizes, great giants called the Nephilim. Mankind learned forbidden practices against animals, metallurgy, weaponsmithing, how to craft killing machines, the creation of jewelry and feminine cosmetics, stellar and lunar astronomy and astrology. Their chief trespass was to teach humans how to brew spermicides. Men began to worship the stars, and the Eternal One gave them what they wanted. The Anunnaki descended and men began to worship them as gods. A third of humanity was killed in the disasters caused by Nibiru's past in 3439 BC, and a third of humanity will likewise perish in 2046 AD, when Nibiru initiates the trumpet judgments of Revelation in the Apocalypse, when a third of mankind dies. 1. Jasha. 2. Flying serpents and dragons. 3. Ancient Egypt, light of the world. 4. From the ashes of angels. 5. Morals and dogma. 6. Return of the serpents of wisdom. 7. The holy tablets. 8. Book of Enoch. 10. The wars of gods and men. 11. The end of days 3. Sitchin. 12. When time began. 13. The Great Pyramid, Smythe. 3435 BC, 460 AM. The pre-flood patriarch Jared is born in this year, a holy man of the Sethite lineage, who was specifically named in commemoration of the event of the descent of the Watchers from heaven. His name is from the root arid, to descend. He is a priest and will father the famous Enoch, who will last be seen among men ascending into heaven. 1. Book of Jubilees. 3395 BC, 500 AM. Jared is 40 years old and distressed over the decadent social conditions after observing how men and women had fallen prey to the Watchers. Jared is shown a vision of God's appearance to earth in the last days, and he is specifically told that his appearance among men will be in 5,500 years. This aligns perfectly with the Annus Mundi dating for this year is 500 AM, and 5,500 years would place the return of God to earth in 2106 AD, the year 6000 Annus Mundi. As calendars go, this year synchronizes with the Jewish calendar's 276th year, or 2 phoenix orbits of 138 years each, or 3312 months, 552 times 6. 1. Book of Adam and Eve. 2. 3373 BC, 5:22 AM. This is the start date of the ancient American Olmec calendar, as discovered by Dr. H.J. Spinden of Harvard in several architectural measurements of ruins in Central America, belonging to the Maya and earlier Olmeca. 3373 BC marks the beginning of their reckoning of time. This date is astronomically aligned with 2 prior significant events. The Olmecs and Maya both reckoned their calendars in multiples of cycles involving 52-year periods. This date is 936 years after the world was destroyed and frozen solid in 4309 BC, or 52 times 18 years, which began the Phoenix chronology. After Earth drifted for 270 years through space, it began to orbit the present Sun in 4039 BC, or 666 years earlier. A third astronomical link is found in that this Olmec start date was 66 years after Nibiru passed and the Watchers descended to Earth. Nibiru's orbit being 792 years and 66 years is 792 months. 1. Sargon the Magnificent. Flying serpents and dragons. 3361 BC, 5:34 AM. A strewn field of rock and ice fragments, with a dust cloud having broke free of Nibiru, now enter the inner solar system as the ancient Earth-killer comet group. This massive debris will assume a solar orbit exactly half of Nibiru's 792 years, orbiting the Sun every 396 years. This year, 3361 BC, parallels the entire 3361 pyramid-inch length of the Great Pyramid's ascendant passage, and the 534 Annus Mundi year here parallels the 534-inch length of the King's chamber floor at the Great Step at the top of the ascendant passage. 3343 BC, 5:52 AM. Planet Phoenix passes through the inner system, completing its 138-year orbit on its way back to the Kuiper belt. As this is 552 Annus Mundi, this completes the first Phoenix cycle since mankind was banished in 3895 BC. Further, many connections between the planet Phoenix and the geometry of the Great Pyramid are seen throughout this research. In this year, which is 5448 years before Armageddon, Phoenix was probably very clearly visible, as this sum, 5448, is the precise pyramid-inch height of the Great Pyramid without its capstone, a piece of architecture that fits atop the monument and is symbolic of the return of the chief cornerstone the builders Anunnaki rejected at Armageddon in 2106 AD. 3273 BC, 6:22 AM. Jared fathers Enoch, the seventh descendant from Adam in the Sethite line. Enoch will emerge to be the most famous of all antediluvian personages, remembered by ancient cultures around the world. At this time, the Anunnaki are raising many sons, the Nephilim, as the Cainites continue to trade their daughters for Anunnaki knowledges and technology. These unions produced a race of giants, and already, 166 years after the descent of the Watchers, the Nephilim are becoming populous. 1 Genesis 5:18. 3233 BC, 6:62 AM. At age 40, Enoch begins his ministry and prophesies against the Nephilim and their Anunnaki fathers. He condemns the Cainites who now live in total vice, practicing exogamy with the Nephilim families and sharing their culture corrupted by intoxicants and hedonism. Enoch is shown the tables of heaven called tablets of destinies by the Sumerians, divine inscriptions of the past, present and future histories of the earth and the heavens. He prophesies that the offspring of the angels, the giants, would perish off the face of the earth, and that only a handful of men would survive a terrible flood. He foretold that even after this disaster the giants would reappear. Enoch is made to comprehend the motion of the celestial bodies, the patterns of the stars and the constellations that are a luminous prophetic code interpreted and understood by the angels. Enoch is taught by God the secrets of time and calendars, and is given divine instructions and plans on the building of a monument on earth that would serve as an enduring testimony to all the future generations of man. He is shown this monument, and in a vision he sees a great and lofty mountain, a strong rock. Internally it was deep and very smooth as if it had been rolled over. The imagery here is of the Great Pyramid's smooth white limestone casing blocks, as had faced the monument long ago prior to 1356 AD, when an earthquake damaged the structure and locals mined the valuable stone for building materials in Lower Egypt. Enoch is told by an angel that this structure is where the spirits of the righteous are collected. This identifies it as the altar of God, as seen in Revelation, when during the apocalypse the souls of the unjustly slain cry out to God for vengeance. As will be reviewed, the Great Pyramid is called the altar of God in the land of Egypt. Though Enoch was a pre-flood prophet, the majority of his recorded prophecies concern the last days, when according to him the Watchers will again descend to earth to plague mankind. He claimed that the sons of the Watchers, giants, hybrid Nephilim offspring, will bear a terrible curse, for they were a hybrid abomination between angel and human. After God destroyed their bodies in a flood, their spirits would roam the earth as restless ghosts, evil spirits that corrupt, oppress, deceive, masquerading as trolls, imps, elves, and now aliens, contending with men and afflicting them as phantoms, spectres, and baleful entities, disguised as the souls of the dead people passed on. 1. Tales of the Prophets. Enoch. 5. Jubilees. 3208 BC, 687 AM. At 65 years of age, the prophet Enoch is made king of the Sethite line, a reign that will last 108,000 days, 300 years of 360 days each. He fathers Methuselah, who will go on to live longer than any human has ever or will ever live during the period of banishment, an age of 969 years. Methuselah's name was actually a prophecy, meaning, "When I die, the flood, shall come." In fact, the flood occurred in the same year Methuselah died, in 2239 BC. The centre of Sethite civilization before the flood and seat of Enoch's kingdom was in the geographical area known later as Egypt. Details on Enoch's kingship and Methuselah's birth in Genesis 5:21 and Jasher 3:12. 3205 BC, 690 AM. In the third year of Enoch's reign, planet Phoenix passed through the inner solar system, completing its 138-year orbit on its way back out to the Kuiper belt. This completes the second 552-year Phoenix cycle. As shown in When the Sun Darkens, the prophet Enoch is associated with legends of the Phoenix. As Phoenix is the planet of chronology, we are not surprised to find that Enoch is the most famous chronologist in antiquity. 3195 BC, 700 AM. In this year, according to the Apocalypse of Adam, found among the Gnostic Nag Hammadi texts of Egypt, Adam revealed to his son Seth the hidden knowledge of God concerning the destruction of the entire world by floodwaters as an act of the wrath of God. Seth was told that there would be righteous survivors. Seth was 570 years old at this time, and as will be shown, would be the principal architect of the Great Pyramid after Enoch's disappearance. Interestingly, this is 230 years before Adam's death in 2965 BC, and 230 years is 2760 months, or 552 times 5. This was the 13th year of Enoch's reign. 1. The Nag Hammadi Library. 3165 BC, 7:30 AM. Cain is killed in his old age by accident by a relative named Lamech. Philo wrote that Cain lived for 730 years. This is 52 times 4, or 208 years of Olmec calendar. 1. Sargon the Magnificent. 3163 BC, 7:32 AM. In the 45th year of the reign of Enoch, the Sethites erect several megalithic sites in the northern hemisphere, after journeying from their homelands. The Archaix site in France is erected with multiple rows of megaliths, as a calendar embodying the concept of a 360-day year. Newgrange is built in Ireland, a gigantic earthworks having geometric alignments and parallels with Stonehenge in England. By the vernal equinox, Newgrange is finished. Astrophysicist Tom Ray of Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies discovered that sunlight would have penetrated the back wall of Newgrange's deep tunnel and chamber 5150 years back from when he calculated, at the exact moment the sun emerged over the eastern horizon. This date indicated 7:32 AM or 3163 BC. The builders then moved to southern England and erect Stonehenge 1, which consists of an outer earthworks ring, outer megalithic sarsen circle, with huge lintels fit perfectly together in tongue-in groove fashion and with a curvature forming a perfect 360-degree circle. The stunning chronometry of Stonehenge matches that of the Great Pyramid and is the subject of chapters in Anunnaki Homeworld. The Great Trilithon at the centre of the formation, the highest of the megaliths, is 3 gigantic blocks with 6 planes each, thus 6 by 6 by 6. The cube of 6 forms the gematria for Debur, or most holy place, which represents that a stone, symbol for man, contains something of importance to the Creator. This is Enoch's 70th year of ministry against the Anunnaki and Nephilim. Chapter 34 of Enoch is about Stonehenge, which reads, "Towards the north to the ends of the earth, and I saw there a glorious device." The place in Wales where the blue stones originated from was long ago called Carn Enoch. Further, the earliest name for the country around Newgrange in Ireland was Uriel, which happens to be the name of the angel in the Enochian writings that instructed the pre-flood prophet. Stonehenge long ago was associated with Saturn, who was also known as Cronus, time. Saturn was originally Seth, who was 602 years old in this year with still more life to live. Seth would die during the 90 years of construction on the Great Pyramid. In Lost Language of Symbolism 2, we find that Stonehenge served thus as a gigantic timekeeper, chronometer or clock. Stonehenge was a lithic representation of time when studied three-dimensionally, counting angles, planes and corners. Stonehenge embodied the same geometrical relationships found at Newgrange. Like the Great Pyramid, which was originally adorned in massive white limestone casing blocks, Newgrange in Ireland was originally covered in a layer of white quartz fragments so that it would be seen for miles in the sparkling sunlight. As will be shown, the Great Pyramid was finished in 2815 BC or 1080 Annus Mundi, and interestingly, the tunnel length leading to the inner chamber wall is exactly 1080 pyramid inches. These were calendrical monuments, and this date is linked to the year the Watchers descended in 3439 BC, being 276 years, or 2 phoenix orbits of 138 years each. This period is 3312 months, or 552 times 6. As this is Enoch's 70th year prophesying against the Anunnaki, this is also 210 of the Olmec calendar, or 70 times 3. 1. Sacred number, Richard Heath. 2. Sex, symbols and the stars. 3. Beyond 2012 AD, citing Robert Heath. 4. Lost Language of Symbolism. 6. Primitive Mythology. 3151 BC, 7:44 AM. In this year, King Enoch of the Sethites is elected by the people to be emperor over 130 kings and princes, establishing peace between all kingdoms. This is the result of his fame and wisdom and belief that he is in direct communion with God. His empire would last 243 years, paralleling the 243 years from Enoch's first regnal year as a king in 3208 BC to the death of Adam in 2965 BC. This unique year is found encoded within the chronometrical dimensions of the Great Pyramid, a fact borne out in chronotecture. The calendrics for this year reveal some intriguing golden proportion sequences. 2088 Anunnaki chronology is 1044 plus 1044 years. 144 being a golden proportion number, demonstrates easily by the Fibonacci spiral. 888 of the orbital chronology, the 888th time the planet Earth had circled the Sun since it had adopted this new orbit, is likewise a golden mean number, as is the 222 of the Olmec calendar. This year is 288 years, 144 plus 144, after the descent of the Watchers in 3439 BC. The 520 years of the Jewish calendar is not a golden mean sum. However, multiples of 52 factor in profoundly in calendrical timelines. 1. Jasher. 3121 BC, 7:74 AM. Mayan Itza Temple of the Cross calendar begun in this year with ascension of a goddess who was 800 years old, myth. As will be shown, this is a memory of a Nephilim mother goddess matriarch, probably a female Anunnaki queen. Her dynasty would begin after Enoch was gone. She is remembered in the Americas as Spider-Woman, 8 legs, Old Woman Weaver, and in India she was called Kali, who had 8 arms. This is 252 of the Olmec calendar, 252 years being a sum that separates many major events in world history. 3113 BC, 7:82 AM. Start date of the Mayan long count calendar, the most startling calendrical system from the ancient world, and the most miscalculated and misunderstood. The Mayan calendar is a timeline that counts down to the next year, when the Earth will be removed from its current place orbiting the Sun, when it will assume a new orbit around the Sun in 2046 AD. So much disinformation has been published about the Mayan system that even scholars have been led to believe the calendar ended in 2012 AD, an impossibility. The Sethites under Enoch were extremely advanced chronologists who knew more about the last days than we do. The future judgments and countdown until then were always measured in days, not years, as found numerous times in the cuneiform tablets of the Sumerians and other ancient Near East cultures. Time was reckoned by the passage of days. Even the future apocalypse was known as the last days, not last year. The first recorded element of time measurement in Genesis was The evening and the morning was the first day. The correction of this error allowed us to see that the Anunnaki descended not 432,000 years before the flood, but 432,000 days, shars, being 1200 years between their descent in 3439 BC and the deluge in 2239 BC. The archaic Dutch Uralind texts read that during the pre-flood world, the years were not counted. This is Enoch's 160th year alive, and in this year 79 mysterious blue stones, representing the Anunnaki, are added to Stonehenge 1. This is referred to Stonehenge 2, and the added 79 blue stones and original 81 sarsens of Stonehenge add up to 160 megaliths, mirroring the prophet chronologist's age. This is also Enoch's 120th year, prophesying against the Anunnaki. The message of Stonehenge 2 is revealed in Anunnaki Homeworld that after a period of 2400 years, 864,000 days, the year would be broken in 713 BC, and the perfect 360-day years would become 365.25. The Mayan long count is precisely 1,872,000 days in length, being 13 baktuns, each baktun being 144,000 days. On the 1,872,000th day, time will collapse, the date referred to as 13.0.0.0.0. Careless scholarship resulted with the false end date of 2012 AD. Accurately interpreting the long count. The 360-day period to the Maya was called the Tun, being the basis for Mayan prophetic timekeeping. Zechariah noted that the three methods of calculating the long count all relate to the arbitrary number 360. Despite this revelation, the Sumerian scholar calculated the Mayan calendar under the corrupted 365.25 year. He is not alone. Because scholarship ignores solid archaeological and textual evidence that Earth's orbit was dynamically altered in 713 BC, when all the calendars of the ancient world changed from China to the Americas. Calculation of the 1,872,000 days under the wrong solar year of 365.25 days corrupted the end date to be in 2012 AD, abbreviating the perfect 5,200 years of 360 days, each to 5125 years. The chronologists and astronomers around the world in 713 BC added 5 evil days to the end of their calendars to compensate for the change. The entire system has been calculated under the 365.25 year, when the 365.25 day calculation is only good for years after the 713 BC cataclysm that altered the solar year. Prior to 713 BC, the 365.25 year was unknown to the ancients. A tun is 360 days. A baktun is 400 tuns, or 144,000 days, and 13 of these cycles being 1,872,000 days. 13 Mayan baktuns. 2713 BC, 1182 AM, first baktun, 144,000 days. 2313 BC, 1582 AM, second baktun, 288,000 days. 1913 BC, 1982 AM, third baktun, 432,000 days. 1513 BC, 2382 AM, fourth baktun, 576,000 days. 1113 BC, 2782 AM, fifth baktun, 720,000 days. 713 BC, 3182 AM, sixth baktun, 864,000 days. 864 is the foundation of the time number, as seen clearly in 3031 BC. In 713 BC, the dark satellite passes too close to Earth, lost moon of Nibiru, and a flux tube incinerates 185,000 Assyrian soldiers on their way to Jerusalem. A cataclysm alters Earth's orbital distance from the Sun enough to add 5.25 days to the year. The baktuns were 400 years, but now they are 394.5 years, due to the lengthening of the time it takes Earth to get around the Sun. See 713 BC for details. 319 BC, 3576 AM, 7th Bucktun, 1,008,000 days. 76 AD, 3970 AM, 8th Bucktun, 1,152,000 days. 470 AD, 4364 AM, 9th Bucktun, 1,296,000 days. 864 AD, 4758 AM, 10th Bucktun, 1,440,000 days. The synchronization of 864 Anno Domini calendar is another piece of evidence that the calendars of the world, though often unrelated, were instituted by intelligent design. 1258 AD, 5152 AM, 11th Bucktun, 1,584,000 days. This is the Annus Mundi year 5152, which reflects the exterior angle of the Great Pyramid at 51 degrees 51 to 52 minutes, formerly found in the perfect white limestone casing blocks that numbered 144,000. 1652 AD, 5546 AM, 12th Bucktun, 1,728,000 days. 2046 AD, 5940 AM, 13th Bucktun, 1,872,000 days. Mayan calendar complete with 13th Bucktun. The ancient world was divided between 12 regions, but the Americas were then unknown, being the 13th region. The origin of the Maya. The Maya were 13 clans living under the 13 heavens who originally lived in North America before they migrated to Central America. In 2046 AD, the civilization of North America will be obliterated by a disaster. The United States, which began as 13 colonies of Britain, are people racially and spiritually descended from the 13 tribes of Israel, believers of a new covenant. The 13th tribe was Ephraim, the tribe of adoption. Adopting foreign people is what made the United States what it is. Using scientific data obtained from a convention of archaeologists, astrophysicists, botanists and historians who convened in 1997 AD, Frank Joseph demonstrates in his research that in the year 3113 BC, a single or series of comet meteorite impacts devastated North America, causing global quakes, temperature and climate changes, drought and blanketing of cosmic dust. His conclusion is that a cataclysm began the Mayan long count. This aligns perfectly with this thesis, which demonstrates that a cataclysm will also end the long count. There is evidence that the origin of Venus or the site of a long tail trailing off of Venus was seen in 3113 BC. The Mayan historian Morley wrote that the Mayan civilization is lost in the remote past, not even the shadowy half-lights of tradition illuminating its beginnings. The very earliest inscriptions literally burst upon us fully formed, the flower of long-continued astronomical observations, expressed in a graphic system exceeding intricacy. Spinden wrote, "It would be accepted as self-evident that the Maya calendar could not have sprung suddenly into being, based as it is upon exact astronomical facts and intricate mathematical calculations. There was no earlier civilization in the American field sufficient to furnish even the fundamental concepts of the calendar." This was the early opinion of the baffled scholars, but now it has been discovered that the Maya merely preserved this ancient calendar from the Olmeca. The discovery of a jade figurine with a calendar inscribed upon its stomach indicates to scholars the date of 3113 BC, showing that this unique calendrical system antedated the Maya and every other archaic American system, spanning back to at least 1200 BC. Jean Reinhardt, in Science Digest, September 1967, wrote that it is a masterpiece of mathematical knowledge, and it was the Olmeca, not the Maya, who developed it. Again, they are only one more discovery away from finding that the Olmecs didn't develop it either. This 3113 BC date was 260 of the Olmec calendar, or 52 times 5. The entire length of the long count was 5200 years, that were 360 days each, or 52 by 100. 1. Secret Cities of Old South America. 2. The Mayan Prophecies for 2012. 3. The Lost Realms, Skywatchers in the Jungles. 4. Children of the Sun. 5. Survivors of Atlantis. 8. Our Haunted Planet. 3103 BC, 792 AM. This begins the Kali Yuga calendar of ancient India, known as the Black Age, that began with emergence of an 8-armed goddess, a bloodthirsty queen. Her symbol was an upside-down pentagram. She was remembered as the wicked deity Shiva by the Hindu, having 8 arms, a deity of destruction. She is Spider-Woman in Old America, but the early Egyptians recalled her as a male deity, the Scorpion King, 8-armed arachnid. Kali is feminine form of the Sanskrit Kala, meaning time. The Persians relate that on this date there was a disaster involving a flooding. In 290 BC, 293 BC to be precise, the Egyptian priest historian Manetho studied the Egyptian Old Chronicle that cites 113 regnal descendants in a 36,525 year period back to Pharaoh Scorpion. But the text is a code, as evidenced by the number 36525, being the same as the solar year at that time, 365.25 days. Interestingly, this sum is decoded by dividing it by 13 lunar months, the lunar year, which gives us 2810 years before 293 BC, for the date of 3103 BC. In this year, the chronologist King Enoch was 170 years old. This was the 130th year of his prophesying against the Anunnaki and his 48th year as emperor. Kali is a fragment memory of the Anunnaki dynasty that was then emerging but not yet in power, at least not over the Sethites. The date 3100 BC is the time assigned by Egyptologists to the rule of Nama, who unified all the people into a united kingdom. Nama is in fact Enoch, described with the epithet Na. Ner is the same, representing 600, an epoch, and Mer, the Egyptian designation for pyramid, 3100 BC being Enoch's 108th year of rule. Vedic Puranic texts read that the Kali Yuga age would end after 3100 years with the appearance of a saviour king, the great Sakka, who will remove wickedness from the earth. This 3100 years counts down to 2 BC, birth of Jesus. Tradition attests that it was this great Sakka that the Persian Magi sought when Jesus was born. 1. The Secret Doctrine. 2. The Illustrated Book of Signs and Symbols. 3. The Oxford Illustrated Companion. 4. Survivors of Atlantis. 5. Secret Cities of Old South America. 6. The Destruction of Atlantis. 7. Round Towers of Atlantis. The calendrics of 3103 BC further support its calendrical import. The Kali Yuga age began in the year 792 Annus Mundi, 792 being the total orbit of the Anunnaki planet Nibiru, the Kali Yuga being the beginning of Anunnaki rulership over part of humanity. This was 864 years before the flood, the sum of 864 being a number that links both time and space like no other number is seen in 3031 BC. Also, 3103 BC is 5208 before Armageddon, when the Anunnaki are defeated by the chief cornerstone in 2106 AD, 5,208 years being 744 times 7 or 434 times 12. As will be shown in this research, a period of judged time is 434 years, or 62 weeks of years in biblical eschatology. The Black Age begins a countdown to the end of Anunnaki dominion. 3102 BC, 793 AM. Scholars are at variance over the start of the Kali Yuga age, some believing it began in 3102 instead of 3103 BC. Because some consider this as year 1 of the Kali Yuga, then the start date of 3103 BC is precise. 1. Children of the Sun. 3100 BC. This is the scholarly imposed approximate for the Nama palette, also known as the Victory Tablet of King Menes, which depicts a picture of a smooth-sided pyramid that Zechariah Sitchin holds, as proof that even at this early date, the concept of the pyramid was known. The true date is 3103 BC. It is to be noticed that between 3163 BC and 3103 BC, that the world's most mysterious and well-preserved calendrical systems were all begun. 3163 BC, Newgrange and Stonehenge 1. Enoch was 110 years old. 3121 BC, Mayan Itza Temple of the Cross. Enoch 152 years old. 3113 BC, Mayan Long Count. Enoch 160 years old. 3103 BC, Vedic Kali Yuga calendar. Enoch 170 years old. It is not without significance that the three timelines from 3121 to 3103 BC are all begun within 18 years of each other and are all systems employing ages measured in multiples of 144,000 days, 288,000, 432,000, etc. 1. Journey to the mythical past. 3073 BC, 8:22 AM. The Anunnaki homeworld Nibiru reached aphelion, furthest distance from the Sun, after travelling away from inner system far out in the Kuiper belt for 366 years, since passing over the ecliptic in 3439 BC. It now begins to journey back towards the inner system. This is the 200th year of the life of Enoch. 3067 BC, 8:28 AM. Planet Phoenix enters the inner system, completing its 138-year orbit, and begins journey back out into the Kuiper belt. This was the second time that Phoenix entered the inner system since Enoch was alive. As Phoenix is the planet of chronology and Enoch was famous for being a seer chronologist, the two facts do not seem to be unrelated. This year is the exact midpoint of antediluvian history, being 828 years after man was banished from Eden in 3895 BC and 828 years to the Great Flood in 2239 BC. As this is 46 years after start of Mayan calendar, sometime in this year is the 552nd year of Mayan chronology. 3031 BC, 8:64 AM. After 330 years below the ecliptic, the ancient Earth killer comet group enters the inner system, passing close to Earth, illuminating the skies. This year is of great calendrical significance. It was Enoch's 120th year as emperor, and as it was 864 Annus Mundi, it began a 792-year countdown to the Great Flood in 2239 BC, 792 being the orbital period of the Anunnaki planet Nibiru. This year was 2208 of the Anunnaki chronology, or 552 times 4 years, and 408 years since their descent to Earth, or 2448 plus 2448 months. In Egypt, the number for catastrophe was 2448, as seen in 1447 BC. The number 864 links time and space and is the most important of all calendrical numbers. It is the mathematical nexus between all the world's calendrical systems, based off the numbers 6, 12 and 144, a golden proportion number. In time and space, it relates to the movement of the Earth. A day, 86,400 seconds. 60 days, 86,400 minutes. 360 days, 8,648 hours. 24 years, 8,640 years. 72 years, 864 months. The sum of 864 is 432 plus 432, or 144 times 6, or 108 times 8. As the Earth orbits the Sun every 864 years, the zodiac retrogrades 12 degrees in the cycle of precession, a degree being 72 years. 11 degrees is 792 years. This occurs as Earth travels along the ecliptic plane at 66,600 miles per hour around the Sun. The Sun's radius is 432,000 miles, giving it a diameter of 864,000 miles, about 108 times the diameter of Earth minus 8640 miles. Earth's own equatorial diameter before the flood was 7920 miles, but the equatorial bulge was caused at the Great Flood in 2239 BC, increasing this girth by 6.41 miles. The Earth is 93 million miles away from the Sun, and by these unusual facts seems to be commensurate Because of the size of the sun, the size of the Earth and the distance between them, the dark shadow behind the Earth pointing away from the sun, called the umbra, always points away from the sun at a distance of 864,000 miles. The umbra is the region of total shadow, unlike the penumbra, which is partial shadow. This year of 3131 BC is also the 864th month of the Vedic chronology. This date concerns something of importance to the Anunnaki, perhaps a sign or the start of a movement. 3 calendars all relate to the Anunnaki involve this date. Of course, the Anunnaki chronology, the descent of the Watchers, and the Vedic calendar. As this is years before the flood, here too is an Anunnaki-related countdown to the end of their dominion and kingdoms at the Diluvian disaster of 2239 BC. By studying the architecture of the Great Pyramid, researchers were able to determine how long the royal cubit was. They discovered that the unit of measurement to lay out the monument would measure the circumference of the Earth out in 86,400,000 cubits. Further, in Hebrew, the grammatical value of the words world and all nations, as well as the word habitation, all equal 432. Combining these ideas, we get 864 for whole inhabited world. 1. Fingerprints of the gods. 2. The energy grid. 3. Atlantis in America. 4. Stones and the scarlet thread. 2965 BC, 9:30 AM. Adam died, the ancients tolling his years from man's banishment in 3895 BC. But Adam was created by the Anunnaki in 4039 BC, 144 years priorly. Thus the man actually outlived Methuselah by 105 years, living 1074 years. On his deathbed, Adam gathered his sons, and a scribe is brought to record his prophecies. He relates that the flood is coming and will kill everyone but 8 people. He orders that his body is to be buried at the middle of the earth, Giza, c. 2815 BC, this being the prime meridian of the pre-flood world. He commanded that Seth was to carry out the project, his firstborn son of the lineage that would be saved from destruction. Adam gives Seth an ark with holy relics of gold, incense and myrrh, and declared that God himself had provided these artifacts as signs to mankind in the future. These relics were to be preserved on the ark, a ship that would endure the deluge and afterward be placed in a city at the middle of the earth. Though he predicted that the city would be destroyed and plundered after the flood, the relics would be preserved until the word of God, made man, shall come, and kings shall offer the gold, incense and myrrh as tokens of his holy divinity. Adam died in the 243rd year of Enoch's reign, the prophet-emperor separating himself for long periods of time to be instructed by God about the future of earth. Though news of Adam's death was not known immediately, the inhabitants of the earth knew that something dreadful had happened because at the same hour the sun darkened in daytime. This is the first time in history of any record of the sun darkening, which would not have been the moon, but that of a celestial object transiting between the sun and earth, darkening our world in shadow. Having spent 66 years above the ecliptic, the ancient Earth-killer comet group now begins its 330-year orbit below the ecliptic, for a total orbital duration of 396 years, half of Nibiru's orbit. The comet group fractured away from Nibiru, and the 66 years over the ecliptic is exactly 792 months. The 930 years of Adam's life from his banishment till death parallels the length of Anunnaki history from 5239 BC to the beginning of their chronology to the destruction of the day star in 4309 BC that ended the binary system, destroyed whole planets and rearranged the entire solar system. Recall that 930 years is the product of both orbital periods of Nibiru 792 and Phoenix 138. With Adam's death, God intends to fulfill his promise to his first earthborn son, that he would have an altar erected for him as a sign to all generations that Adam, and by extension humanity, was forgiven. As seen in 2815 BC, this altar is the Great Pyramid. Since the establishment of an Anunnaki matriarch in 3103 BC has now passed 138 years, a Phoenix orbit, or 1656 months, 553 times 3. Also, the 148 years of the Mayan calendar is 1776 months, 1776 being a number encoded many times within the geometrical measurements of the Great Pyramid, and found in timelines throughout history involving the Abrahamic Israelite descendants of the Sethite lineage. 1. Genesis, Book of Adam and Eve. Jasher, Tales of the Prophets. 2944 BC, 9:51 AM. Chinese Shu King text relates that Fu He lived an Oriental Noah. This anachronism conveys that some ancient Chinese chronicler knew the duration of Noah's life at 950 years, and this chronicler began that 950 years around the start of a calendar that this chronicler had access to, similar to the Annus Mundi, beginning in 3895 BC. This 2944 BC date is 1 year off from 950 years after man's banishment. There is more evidence in this research exhibiting that the early Chinese once had access to accurate ancient chronologies. 1. The Great Pyramid, its divine message. 2929 BC, 9:66 AM. Planet Phoenix passes through the inner solar system, completing its 138-year orbit on its way back out to the Kuiper belt. 2921 BC, 9:74 AM. At age 352, Enoch fathers a daughter named Naamah. She would later be married to the famous Noah, who was 82 years younger than she. The 3 world-famous sons would be named Japheth, Iapetos, Shem and Ham, and be born before the flood. Naamah is destined to acquire an infamous life after the flood. She is recorded as one of the most wicked women of antiquity, as will be shown. 1. Jasher. 2909 BC, 9:86 AM. Strange dreams and omens afflict the kings and princes and priests, and Enoch assembles all of them. A remarkable fact preserved also in the Coptic records preserved by Arab scholars. It is concluded in a council that a terrible disaster is going to come upon all mankind, and Enoch secludes himself for many days until God reveals to him divine instructions on an architectural project. Enoch is to pass on the plans for his people to build immense constructions of stone at Akhuzan, Giza, at the middle of the earth. Enoch passes on these instructions. Enoch reveals that he is to depart, that he will be seen on earth no more, and the masses grieve. Calendrically, this is a revealing year. As 762 of the Jewish calendar, we see here a change of dynasty, as in 762 AD with the Abbasid dynasty's move to Baghdad in Babylon. This sum, 762, will denote this many times throughout history. The Sumerian king lists specifically record that this date, 670 years before the flood, was the start date of Alulim, the first of the Anunnaki dynasty to rule over Earth. The title Alulim denotes a female demon, Alu. This further explains the paradox of the 8 and 7 kings of the Anunnaki. Popular known throughout hundreds of ancient references, they are called the 7 kings, powerful Anunnaki rulers over mankind, but the lists always have an 8th title. Alulim reigns for 28,800 shahs, evenings and mornings, days, or 80 years. Her first 70 years of rule over the Canaanites and their kingdoms, as well as the Nephilim nations and giants, is insignificant until 2839 BC. The latter 10 years of her reign is over even the unwilling Sethite kingdoms formerly under Enoch. She rules from the pre-flood city Eridu, erected by Irad, a son of Cain. This year is 204 years of the Mayan calendar, which counts down to a total Anunnaki invasion in 2046 AD and global disaster, like their first appearance in 3439 BC, killing a third of mankind. This 204 years is 2448 months again, 2448 the Egyptian number denoting cataclysm. It will be shown in this research that the sum of 670 years concerns empires and their beginnings and endings. This Anunnaki matriarch initiates her rule 670 years before the deluge. 1. Jasher. 2. Origin and significance of the Great Pyramid. 2908 BC, 987 AM. This is the 243rd year of Enoch's empire, exactly 300 years, 108,000 days, since he had begun to rule over the Sethites. Enoch goes to a place called Archaix, Giza, where he is taken up into the sky before 800,000 people. It is said that Enoch never died and that he would return to earth in the last days to execute a prophetic ministry against the Watchers during the apocalypse. It is also declared that Enoch departed in the same hour and day that he was born, 365 years earlier. The people assembled and the words and instructions of Enoch were read aloud. The divine instructions they were to follow in building a gigantic monumental complex at that same site. As the Anunnaki had determined to rule over men on earth, the Creator took Enoch into heaven to rule the faithful Anunnaki, angels, that had kept their divine estates. 1. Genesis. Secrets of Enoch. 2. Jasher. 2905 BC, 990 AM. The Sethite architects surveyed the Giza Plateau area and began quarrying stone from many miles away, and the builders began the altar of God. As the plateau was levelled, an elaborate and deep tunnel system with great galleries of rock and subterranean chambers was dug out. The 4 cornerstones were laid first, and the perimeter of the Great Pyramid was laid next, and the erection of the monument was from the 4 corners up and inward. The beginning of construction from a distance appeared like 4 leaning towers of stone, several courses high, with the centre of the pyramid at all times of construction the lowest. The 51° (0.51 to 52 minute) angle sloping faces were carefully employed during the erection of more and more courses, added from the perimeters inward. As the structure was built up in elevation, the central portion remained like a cube, much lower than the 4 corners of the monument. The project will require 90 years, 1080 months, to complete, in 2815 BC, and its precision to the thousandths of an inch is by far more superior to structures erected by men in the 21st century. The distribution of the interior passages and chambers had long baffled researchers. However, the knowledgeable interpreter can read the measurements of the monuments as a great geometrical timeline of world history, immortalized in stone. This is the subject of chronotecture. This was originally theorized as early as 1859 AD and popularized from 1860 to 1924 AD. But because these researchers were deficient in an accurate chronology of history, their exhibition of the theory fell short before the critics. The pyramid inch, based upon the velocity of the Earth around the Sun, is the basis for the length of measurement used in planning out the architecture of the Great Pyramid. In this year, the Sphinx is carved out of the solid limestone of the Giza Plateau. The statue is the largest to survive the ancient world and is a lithic prophecy of the diligent watcher of Eden, Sphinx, which is a composite symbol for the 4 corners of heaven, the zodiacal bull, lion, eagle and man, that protects the sacred tree, pillar of knowledge, that mankind lost in 3895 BC, but would regain in 2106 AD. Frederick Habermann, in tracing our ancestors, wrote that the Sphinx is the most important symbol of Eden that we have left, or rather constitutes a link between paradise lost and paradise regained. For this Sphinx, with the body of a lion and the head of a woman, symbolizes nothing less than the prophecy that from the seed of the woman shall come the Lion of the tribe of Judah to crush the head of the serpent. And for 55, actually 58 centuries, the Sphinx has been watching for him. The early Egyptians of Thebes held traditions that the Sphinx had the body of a lion and woman's head with eagle's wings. Plutarch wrote that the Sphinx once had wings of a multicolored hue. There is a deeper connection between the Sphinx and the Genesis narrative. Planet Phoenix appeared as a fiery flaming sword that in Genesis was the weapon of the Watcher, preventing mankind from regaining access to the walled enclosure, Eden. This guardian is immortalized as the Sphinx protecting the Great Pyramid site, ever facing east. Remarkably, the Sphinx title derives from the same root from which Phoenix derives, so that Sphinx is actually the same word as Sphinx or Phoenix. Remember the Gnostic text that declared that Phoenix was a witness against the angels. The dimensions of the Sphinx at 240 feet long, with 2 outstretched limbs at a height of 66 feet, exhibits an architectural awareness of the entire length of the Anunnaki chronology of 7344 years. From 5239 BC to 2106 AD, when the chief cornerstone returns, the stone the builders rejected. The length of the statue at 2880 inches and its height of 792 inches, 66 feet. The orbital length of Nibiru in years, we get 3672. This is precisely half of the 7344-year timeline. The measurement of 792 in the statue's height further links it to the Anunnaki. When considering the total intended height of the Great Pyramid with that of the Sphinx, a startling fact emerges. Once the top stone is laid upon the Great Pyramid, which today is flat, the monument with its casing stones would be 5814 inches high, and coupled with the 792-inch height of the Sphinx, we get 6606 pyramid inches. 666 and its variance is a number expressive of the idea of total authority. 2905 BC was exactly 666 years before the flood in 2239 BC. In this year of 2905 BC, the foundation of the pyramid was laid, this being 990 Annus Mundi. This year was 330 times 3. In Hebrew, the gematria for to make atonement is 330. And anything multiplied by 3 in numerology represents totality, a fulfillment. Atonement requires an altar, and as will be seen in 2815 BC, the Great Pyramid is the altar of Adam, or, more precisely, the altar of man. This year is 60 years after Adam died. 1. Tracing our ancestors. 2. The Greek myths. 3. Return of the serpents of wisdom. 2870 BC. 10:25 AM. The Egyptian Coptic records indicate that in the year 498 BC, golden tablets were interpreted that conveyed a history of the Great Pyramid with a description of its origin and purpose that counted back in time to the year 2870 BC. The knowledge upon the golden tablets was supposed to have been copied from off the surfaces of the Great Pyramid. This Coptic chronology is fairly accurate, as this was the 35th year of pyramid construction at Giza, c. 498 BC. 2853 BC, 10:42 AM. Seth died in the 52nd year of construction on the Giza site at 912 years old. As chief engineer and firstborn carrier of the Messianic bloodline, patriarch of the Sethites, he was buried somewhere at Giza. 2 calendrical markers align perfectly with his 52nd year of pyramid construction. This was the year 520 of the Olmec calendar, or 52 times 10, and the year 260 of the Mayan calendar, or 52 times 5. 1 Genesis. 2852 BC, 10:43 AM. An ancient Chinese prophet in this year taught the people writing. This is of particular interest because it was at this time that the lower multi-ton white limestone casing blocks were being prepared and dressed, with writings being placed upon them during pyramid construction. These knowledges were written by Enoch. 1. The Antediluvian World. 2844 BC, 10:51 AM. The golden tablets translated for King Philippus in 498 BC provided a second chronology concerning the construction of the Great Pyramid, dating the construction at 946 prior to the arrival of the sons of Ham, Shem, into Egypt after the deluge. This migration took place in 1898 BC, years after the catastrophe remembered as the Babel Dispersion. This is the 61st year of construction at Giza. 1. Origin and significance of the Great Pyramid. 2843 BC, 10:52 AM, 4948 before Armageddon. Egyptian Coptic records date the construction of the Great Pyramid in this year, which was indeed the 62nd year of construction. The calendrics for this year are intriguing. As 828 of Jewish calendar, this was 6 phoenix orbits of 138 years each, or 2 cursed Earth periods, 414 plus 414. It was 270 of the Mayan calendar, or 3240 months, 1080 times 3, and 260 of the Vedic calendar, being 52 times 5. The Vedic relating to Anunnaki dynasty. This Anunnaki dynasty began in 2909 BC, 66 years before this date, or 792 months. 2839 BC, 10:56 AM. This year marks the 66th year of pyramid construction, or 792 months. Exactly 70 years earlier, the Anunnaki dynasty began with a matriarch ruling over the Canaanite kingdoms in 2909 BC. But in this year, the empire of the Nephilim expands to include the Sethites. This is the 264th year of the Vedic calendar, the Kali Yuga that began with a wicked goddess, 264 years being 66 times 4, again providing us with 792 times 4 months. The sum of 792 is the calendrical signature of the Anunnaki and Nephilim. Priorly in 3439 BC, exactly 600 years earlier, the Anunnaki watchers traded knowledge for the daughters of men, but now they take human females by force from their fathers and husbands. They also practice hybridization between species of animals and plants. The oldest stories of the Chinese concern the Dragon Kings, who founded the first Chinese dynasty. They descended from heaven and had flying machines. The founder of this dynasty was called Son of the Red Dragon. The Dragon Kings were the firstborn sons of heaven and earth, which in ancient Sumer, these words, heaven and earth, were An-ki, and these dragon kinds were thus Anunnaki. An-una-ki. The same story is told in archaic records of India, and these machines that flew people around were named Vimanas. This begins the 600-year reign of terror of the Nephilim over mankind, which starts 600 years after their fathers appeared in 3439 BC as the Anunnaki. The Nephilim were angel-human hybrids, gigantic of stature and highly intelligent. This is 2400, 600 times 4 of the Anunnaki chronology, and 1200, 600 times 2, since Earth began orbiting this sun. The famous hero Noah was born in the first year of the oppression before the flood, 2839 BC, on the vernal equinox, anciently first day of the year. He is named Menachem, Comforter, and he is the fulfillment of a prophecy preserved by the Sethites concerning a man who would be born and save the world. As a type of saviour, Noah was born in the year 1056 Annus Mundi, 1056 years after man was banished from Eden in 3895 BC. The sum of 1056 is the geometrical value of the joy of thy salvation in Hebrew, as found in Psalm 51:12. In Greek, 1056 is the value for the heavenly man, as found in 1 Corinthians 15:48. In a passage in Isaiah concerning the Great Pyramid, Isaiah, the statement in Hebrew, he shall send them a saviour and a great one, has the geometrical value of 1056. This Isaiah passage will be explained under 2815 BC. In 1895 AD, the historian J.D. Parsons wrote that Noah's birth was at the meeting point of two of those famous cycles of 600 years, so often referred to by ancient writers. This refers to the Great Year, a 600-year period called by the Sumerians a Ner. Long ago it was taught that a divine man would arise every 600 years. Thus far this tradition has held true, with the descent of the Watchers in 3439 BC, a type of divine man, and the birth of Noah 600 years afterward. We will see that King David also fits within this timeline as well as others. As Noah was born in the first year of the oppression of the Sethites by the Nephilim, the patterns bear out later when Moses is born in the first year of the oppression of the Israelites by the Egyptians. Incidentally, pre-flood Sethite civilization was centered where Egypt was geographically. The Nephilim kings and overlords initiate new laws and policies. Ancient records attest that after Noah was born, the world quickly fell into wickedness and experienced a great population explosion. Humanity turned wholly away from God and flourished in crime, incest, and corruption, filling the earth with violence. Hedonism became widespread among the Sethites now, and the practice of divorce became the norm, marrying wives and giving them up. Abortion became an accepted practice. To kill an embryo in the womb was taught by the Watchers. Both divorce and abortion were Anunnaki population control methods, employed against the Sethites, forcing humans to violate their principal command from God to be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. Those holding to the elder faith became an extreme minority. The The Nephilim matriarch would only rule over the united empire of the Canaanites and Sethites for 10 years before her sons assumed the kingship in 2829 BC, the famous 7 kings of Sumer. 1. Jasher. 2. Odyssey of the Gods. 5. Stones and the Scarlet Thread. 6. Our Sun God, Christianity before Christ. 7. The Christ Conspiracy. 9. Luke. 10. Enoch. 2829 BC, 1066 AM. The first son of the Anunnaki matriarch is Alalgar. His reign is recorded in the Sumerian king list as 36,000 shahs, evenings and mornings, which is 100 years. His reign ending in 2729 BC. His reign completes the 80 years, 28,800 days of the Eridu dynasty begun by his mother, the matriarch Alulim. She is considered the genetrix of the 7 kings, who were considered as gods to the Sumerians and later Babylonians. Though the Sumerians recorded 8 rulers, they were called the 7 kings because the genetrix was excluded. This was the 76th year of pyramid construction. 1. Gerald Massey Lectures. 2815 BC, 1080 AM. The Great Pyramid of Giza and the complex is complete, requiring 90 years, 1080 months, to complete from its start in 2905 BC, this 1080 months mirroring this 1080 Annus Mundi year. This 90 years is 32,400 days, or 10,800 times 3 days. This 32,400 days is reflected in the length of the original perimeter of the Great Pyramid's base, 3024 feet, or 1008 times 3. Even today, as measured by Graham Hancock, it is 323.16 feet. The geometry of the pyramid further identifies its own date of construction. The pyramid sits on a foundation of 4 corners, but the monument was designed to have a 5th corner, the top stone or apex, the cornerstone. Geometrically, the 5 terminations of the pyramid form, when depicted one-dimensionally, exhibit a perfect pentagram, and the pentagram is composed of 10 108-degree angles. Thus, the 5-pointed pentagram is the geometrical sum of the number 1080. The year 1080 of the pre-flood calendar was 2815 BC. A close approximate for this year was made in 1954 AD, when George G.M. James wrote that the Great Pyramid and Giza complex was constructed about 2800 BC. A scientific bullseye. The Great Pyramid's dimensions record many astronomical knowledges. One of these is found in that the combined diameters of the Earth and Moon, being 7920 and 2160 miles, is 10,080 miles. Bonnie Gaunt notes in her fascinating research that the precise geometrical proportions of the Great Pyramid can be constructed on the diameters of Earth and the Moon. Also, because of the Earth-Moon relations, such as distance and velocity around the Sun and the Moon's movement around Earth, the lunar umbra, the Moon's shadow, the total darkness during an eclipse, travels across the face of the Earth at a mean average of 1080 miles per hour. The 1080 pentagram geometry of the Great Pyramid has a mysterious link to the Sumerian symbol for something that falls out of the sky to break up the Earth, called the plough sign. Referred to in Sumerian as the Ar-Ub, the pentagram symbol identifies a celestial body that drops from the sky to destroy the Earth because God's harvest, humanity, has ceased bearing fruit. It must be recalled here that in 1924 AD, Davidson published his research on the geometrical distribution of the Great Pyramid's 4 cornerstones that unveiled a precise astronomical knowledge of a global timeline, the orbital chronology, from 4039 BC to 2046 AD, when Earth will be pushed off its orbital belt by a large celestial body. Further, as will be seen in 2046 AD, a large object from space will slam into North America. The sum 1080 is the geometrical value of the Hebrew statement in Isaiah 66:1, "Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool." Also, 1080 is the value of "the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him." We also read in Isaiah, "God himself that formed the earth and made it." This equals 1080. In the Greek gematria, the term Holy Spirit has the value of 1080. If the total circumference of a circle was 1080, then its diameter would be 344. Gaunt notes that 344 is the grammatical value for great wonder in Greek, as well as the light of the world, as found in Matthew 5:14. The four cornerstones of the monument were highly polished white limestone megaliths, numbered among the 144,000 casing blocks of the monument. These blocks were 100 inches thick, and with a tolerance so smooth that modern architecture has not replicated. For a long time scholars debated on the existence of these perfect blocks, until in 1837 AD, some of these surviving blocks buried at the base of the Great Pyramid were discovered by Colonel Weiss's expedition. The blocks along the lower courses originally had whitened writings on them, still easily seen and translated in the days of Abraham, c. 1837 to 1825 BC, and still noticeable in the days of the Greek historian Herodotus in 450 BC. These blocks cover the interior limestone blocks that make up the Great Pyramid that we see today. The monument is exactly 203 levels of blocks, 203 being the grammatical value for he created. But 203 was not the intended height. With the placement of the chief cornerstone, the monument will be finished at 204 levels. The chief cornerstone represents a divine being that will sit atop the monument of man, the stone the builders Anunnaki rejected. The priest-prophet Ezra wrote that the knowledges of God were preserved in the 204 books, which is an analogy of the 204 courses of the Great Pyramid once the chief cornerstone is placed atop it. The Phoenix chronology from man, banished in 3895 BC, counts 14 cursed Earth periods of 414 years each, 5796 years, to 1902 AD, when planet Phoenix passed through the inner system, depositing millions of tons of cosmic dust and mud on Earth. 1902 AD is the last pass of Phoenix before it returns in 2040 AD and results with a pole shift, meteoric fallout, global flooding and earthquakes, and the death of 25% of humanity, known in the Revelation as the Sixth Seal. The actual levels of blocks of the structure form a chronometrical countdown that begins in the last days, starting at 1902 AD, a date also figuring prominently in the internal chronometry of the Great Pyramid, as found in the extensive charts of chronotecture. Thus, 1902 AD begins a 204-year countdown to the return of the chief cornerstone in the year 2106 AD. The same year that we have already seen is the 6,000th year of mankind's banishment from Eden at 3895 BC. The length of 204 years is 2448 months, the Egyptian number designating cataclysm. It was in 2448 Annus Mundi, 1447 BC, that the Israelites escaped out of Egypt after the country was plagued with terrible disasters. This was the Exodus, revealing that the 2448th month after 1902 AD, that will occur in 2106 AD, signified a planetary exodus. The chief cornerstone will sit upon the flat area atop the monument that measures 48 feet wide and 30 foot high. When capped with a cornerstone, the structure will measure 485 feet high. Gaunt notes that the grammatical value for the statement, "There is no rock like our God," found in 2 Samuel 2:2, is 485. Also in Psalm 73:17, the words "the sanctuary of God" is 485, as well as the prophecy in Isaiah, "The Lord shall be unto you an everlasting light." The total geometrical height of the Great Pyramid, if capstone in place, is exactly 5814 pyramid inches, which is paralleled by an unusual astronomical fact. The peculiar shaft up and out of the structure has long been known to point at the Orion constellation, Orion being an ancient messianic symbol. John Gordon in Egypt, child of Atlantis, wrote, "The maximum altitude above the horizon during the cycle of precession of the constellation Orion is 58 degrees 14 minutes, when it rises almost due east at azimuth 91 degrees. Another coincidence is found in the research of Graham Hancock. In antiquity, the Great Pyramid was the symbol in Egypt for the Gate of Rostal, a spiritual realm of the dead. The Egyptian epoch for when the spirits ruled long ago was 5813 years, according to Manetho of Alexandria. Because the monument was never finished, the cornerstone was rejected. It presently stands at 5448 pyramid inches, which amazingly identifies a particular passage in the Bible that researchers have long suspected refers to the Great Pyramid for other reasons. The following passage in the prophetic book of Isaiah has the geometrical value of 5448. In that day shall there be an altar of the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord, as it shall be for a sign and for a witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. This refers to the altar of Adam placed at the centre of the earth, the 0-degree longitude and latitude, the prime meridian of the pre-flood civilization known as the Pillar of Heaven, the central axis. Prior to Mohammedan times in Arabia, the pyramids were called pillars. In Lost Scriptures of Giza are chapters full of historical and archaeological evidences and proofs that this passage refers to the Great Pyramid. Giza means border, and pyramids were signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, according to Jeremiah the prophet. The Book of Enoch records that the chronologist prophet wrote 366 books, these books being no different than the 244 books of the prophet priest Ezra. They are symbols of pyramid architectural dimensions. The pyramid's present height at 5448 pyramid inches is exactly 366 inches under its intended height, at 5814 pyramid inches, when the chief cornerstone is placed. The pyramid as the central axis of the world at the middle of the earth identifies it with Mount Meru in the Eastern traditions, Mount Masu of Sumer, the tree of knowledge, the tree Yggdrasil of the Scandinavians, Irminsul of the ancient Germans, etc. The present 5448 height as a calendrical code identifies the year 5448 Annus Mundi, or 1554 AD, the exact year that the prophecies of Nostradamus had Europe on fire, with its startling and dire predictions. In Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse we find proof that the French prophet of Jewish ancestry was knowledgeable of planet Phoenix and its appearance in 1902 AD, and its return for a cataclysm in 2040 AD, as well as the second global disaster that will occur in 2046 AD. Both dates encoded within the chronometry of the Great Pyramid. As the altar of man, Adam, at the centre of the earth, the Great Pyramid is referred to in the Vedic writings of ancient India as the altar of Agni. Like the Great Pyramid, it was covered with the Vedic scriptures, with knowledges on its stones, and these stones numbered specifically 10,800 bricks. This aligns with the Arabic traditions, where we find that there is a preserved tablet from of old, a stone writing dating back to the beginning of time that contains all the prophecies and writings and knowledges. The angel of death with 1080 eyes, 360 eyes within 3 large eyes, searches continually through the records, making sure no one dies before their time. Sometime in Enoch's prophetic career, he had a vision of the Great Pyramid and its relation to the Tree of Life. He called it a mountain of fire at the middle of the earth. Pyramid means fire in the middle. He describes its stones as brilliant and beautiful, splendid to behold, and beautiful was its surface, which we know described the original white polished casing blocks of the monument. An angel tells Enoch, "That mountain thou beholdest, the extent of whose head resembled the seat of the Lord, throne, will be the seat on which will sit the holy and great Lord of glory, chief cornerstone, the everlasting King, and when he shall come and descend to visit the earth with goodness." That Enoch fully understand the mystery of the Son of Man, the Christ, is clearly seen in Enoch 46:1-3, where we find him at the court of heaven beholding the Ancient of Days, Creator, and another figure named the Son of Man, who would come to earth and break the power of the mighty and lay low the kings of the earth. It was revealed to Enoch that the Son of Man was ancient, his name invoked in heaven before the sun and stars were created. He, Christ, would be a support pillar for the righteous and shall be the light of the nations. The title for the Creator as Ancient of Days further supports fact that the antediluvian civilization reckoned time by the passing of days as most important, then moons, months, and years. That Enoch wrote that the Saviour would be the light of nations links the pyramid with the Egyptian name for the monument. The Great Pyramid was called Harkuti, or Lord of Lights, or Lord of the Glorified Elect. The sign for Harkuti was the heptagram, the seven-pointed star. Intriguingly, the seven-point geometry is the only way to obtain the elusive 52-degree angle, and the structure at Giza was slanted at precisely 51 degrees, 51 to 52 minutes, or 52 degrees. Even the interior passage angles inside the structure are sloped at 52 degrees. The heptagram is mysterious because, unlike other geometrical forms like the squares and triangles, no two geometrical forms can combine to make it. Further, Harkuti was related to the Egyptian concept of eternal word. Of course, this is another connection to the chief cornerstone, the Word made flesh. The calendrics for this year of 2815 BC, 1080 already examined, demonstrates further unique characteristics for this time. The Great Pyramid was finished 576 years before the deluge, or 144 times 4, the sum of 144 being a golden proportion number. This year was also 288 of Vedic chronology, being 144 plus 144 from 3103 BC, which marked the start of the Black Age, with emergence of an Anunnaki matriarch's rule. This corresponds calendrically with the fact that 2815 BC was the 24th year of the Anunnaki dynasty over the Sethites, called the Oppression. This 24 years was 288 months, paralleling the 288 years since 3103 BC. 1. Fingerprints of the Gods. 2. Stolen Legacy. 3. Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid. 4. Isaiah. 5. Today, Tomorrow and the Great Beyond. 6. Egypt, Child of Atlantis. 7. Fingerprints of the Gods. 8. Isaiah. 9. The Book of Adam and Eve. 2. 10. Tales of the Prophets. 11. Enoch. 13. Gerald Massey Lectures. 2791 BC, 11:04 AM. Planet Phoenix passed through the inner system, completing a 138-year orbit on its way back out to the Kuiper Belt. Though we have no records of Phoenix being sighted, the calendrics indicate that Phoenix was indeed seen, and perhaps there may have been a transit, darkening the sun. This year completes the second 552-year Phoenix cycle since man's banishment in 3895 BC, being precisely 552 years before the deluge. Interestingly, this year was 66.6% the way through the Phoenix timeline, starting with man's banishment to the flood in 2239 BC, and likewise 66.6% of the Anunnaki chronology remains until they are destroyed in 2106 AD, the 6000th year of man's banishment. This year is 2448 of the Anunnaki chronology, 2448 being the number for disaster, c. 1447 BC, and 2791 BC is also 4896 years before Armageddon, or 2448 plus 2448 years. This Phoenix passing was exactly 360 years after Enoch had been made emperor in 3151 BC. Noah was 48 years old. 2778 BC, 11:17 AM. This is the start date for the Egyptian short chronology, remarkably only 37 years from the completion of the Great Pyramid. 1. Civilization or barbarism. 2755 BC, 11:40 AM. Enosh died, the son of Seth, at age 905, once a mighty king. When he ruled over the Sethites in 3439 BC, the Anunnaki descended to Earth. Incidentally, this year of his death was 2484 Anunnaki chronology, or 6 cursed Earth periods of 414 years each, equaling 18 orbits of Phoenix. 2750 BC, 11:45 AM. Approximate date for completion of the Great Pyramid according to modern Egyptologists. This date is 65 years off. 1. The Secret in the Bible. 2729 BC, 1166 AM. The second king of the Anunnaki Nephilim dynasty takes the throne, named Enmenluana. His seat situated at the city of metalworkers called Bar-Tibira. His Sumerian title, Enmenluana, signifies that he was a priest and son of heaven. His own reign would last 43,000 shahs, evenings and mornings, or 120 years. Noah was 110 years old, his future wife Namah being 192 years old. This year is 70 by 7 to the Great Flood. 2713 BC, 1182 AM. The first bucktun of 144,000 days of the Mayan long count calendar, complete from 3113 BC, factored on the ancient year known to the Maya, the 360-day year. The Mayan system is also based off multiples of 52, and interestingly, this year is 520 years from 3233 BC, when Enoch began prophesying against the Anunnaki. This is also the 408th year of the Mayan Temple of the Cross calendar that started in 3121 BC, 408 years being 2448 plus 2448 months. Noah is 126 years old. Namah is 208 years old, 52 times 4. 2707 BC, 1188 AM. The Anunnaki planet Nibiru ascends out of the deep south of solar system after 732 years below the ecliptic. It passes through the inner system in the 22nd year of King Emenluana of Sumer. The calendrics for this year are astonishing. This is 108 years after the Great Pyramid was completed, and 1188 Annus Mundi, or 108 times 11, from man's banishment in 3895 BC. It is 468 years before the deluge, or 5616 months, which is 108 times 52 months. As this is the 1332nd year that Earth had orbited the Sun in its new astronomical position, this timeline is 666 plus 666 years in orbit, and this year is also the 666th of the Olmec calendar. The Vedic calendar has it at 396th year, half of Nibiru's orbit of 792 years. The Anunnaki dynasty over the Sethites beginning the oppression was 132 years earlier, or 792 plus 792 months, in 2839 BC at the birth of Noah. This year of 2707 BC was precisely a cursed Earth period of 414 years after the start of the Mayan Temple of the Cross calendar in 3121 BC. Nibiru begins its 60-year journey north of the ecliptic. 2699 BC, 1196 AM. This is the traditional beginning of Chinese civilization. Ancient Chinese calendar begins. It must be recalled that the Chinese recall that their own first dynasty began with the Dragon Kings Anunnaki. This year is 600 times 8 years before the Anunnaki are defeated at Armageddon in 2106 AD. As this is 460 years before the flood, it is exactly 5520 months. Historians have for a long time recognized the links between the ancient Maya and the Chinese. We find it here interesting that this calendrical start of China is the 414th year of the Mayan calendar, or a cursed Earth period. 2660 BC, 1235 AM. Canaan died at the age of 910, once a mighty Sethite king. Noah was 179 years old. His future wife Namah was 261. 2653 BC, 1242 AM. Planet Phoenix enters the inner system, completing its 138 years orbit and exits on its way back out to the Kuiper belt. This is one cursed Earth period before the flood, 414 years, and this year uniquely synchronizes with the Mayan calendar. It is 460 years of the Mayan long count, or 5520 months, 552 times 10. The other ancient American system, the Olmec, has it at 720 years, or 10 precessional years, 72 years a degree in the cycle of precession. 2647 BC, 1248 AM. After 60 years north of the ecliptic on its highly elliptical orbit, Nibiru passes back through the inner system and completes its 792-year orbit. This is the 82nd year of the reign of the Nephilim king Enmenluana. Nibiru's appearance in inner system is calendarically significant. This is 2448 plus 2448 months, 408 years before the flood. The 2592 years of the Anunnaki chronology is 864 times 3. It has now been exactly 792 years since the Watchers descended in 3439 BC. Noah is 192 years old, his future wife Nama 274 years old. 2635 BC, 1260 AM. The ancient Earth-killer comet group passes through the inner system after 330 years below the ecliptic on its 396-year orbit. This is the 204th year of the Anunnaki dynasty, or 2448 months. Enman Luana has been ruling for 94 years. 2609 BC, 1286 AM. The third king of the Nephilim dynasty of the Anunnaki is Enmen-Galana, another priest of heaven of the metalworking city of Bad Tabira. Under his reign, the people began altering the natural order of nature. In this year, someone tunneled through the upper masonry of the Great Pyramid from the descendant passage into the ascendant passage system to survey stress fractures and damage caused by earthquakes. This tunnel is present today. Interestingly, this is 4714 years to the year 6000 AM, 2106 AD, and in the Annus Mundi year of 4714, 820 AD, the Arab Caliph of Baghdad, Al-Mamun, tunneled into the Great Pyramid and discovered the Ascendant Passages system. This is 504 of the Mayan calendar, or 6048 months, 864 times 7. As 230th year of Anunnaki dynasty, it was 2760 months, 552 times 5. This was the 300th year, 108,000 days, since the Anunnaki matriarch emerged to rule in 2909 BC. Noah is 230 years old. Enmen-Galana will reign for 28,800 shahs, evenings and mornings, or 80 years. Reign will end in 2529 BC. 2569 BC, 1326 AM. At the exact midpoint of the 80-year reign of the Nephilim king Enmen-Galana, the ancient Earth-killer comet group passes through the inner system, completing its 396-year orbit. The group spends 330 years below the ecliptic and 66 years above it. 2529 BC, 1366 AM. Fourth king of the Nephilim dynasty called Dumuzi begins to reign from the metal worker city of Bad Tabira. The ancient scribal and modern scholarly confusion between Dumuzi and Enoch is due to a chronological parallel involving Enoch's birth year of 622 Annus Mundi and the year he was made emperor over 130 kings and princes in 3151 BC. The early Sumerian chroniclers were aware that Enoch ascended into heaven and was born on the 622nd year of a pre-flood calendar. However, because Dumuzi's reign began exactly 622 years after Enoch became emperor, in 3151 BC, over time the accounts of Enoch and Dumuzi were merged, making Dumuzi ascend into heaven as well. This year is 666 years after Seth learns about the coming of the flood, in 3195 BC. Noah is 310 years old, this being the 300th year of the Nephilim Bad Tabira dynasty. 2515 BC, 1380 AM. Planet Phoenix passes through the inner solar system, completing its 138-year orbit, and begins its journey back toward and into the distant Kuiper belt. This is 324 of the Anunnaki dynasty, or 108 times 3 in 300 years, 108,000 days since the completion of the Great Pyramid in 2815 BC. 2473 BC, 1422 AM. The priest Jared died at age 962, the father of Enoch, who was given a vision of the chronology of the world, until the appearance of God to gather his redeemed, a date revealed to him as being 5,500 years after his 40th year, which was the year 500 Annus Mundi, signifying the year 2106 AD. His death was 432 years, 108 times 4, after the foundation was laid to the Great Pyramid in 2905 BC. Noah was 366 years old. This was the 56th year of the reign of the Nephilim king Dumuzi. 2446 BC, 1449 AM. A five-planet alignment of Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn was seen from Earth and recorded by the Chinese as occurring in this year, the Emperor Chu Ni reigning. This is exactly 207 years before the Great Flood, 207 being 2484 months, 414 times 6, or half a cursed Earth period of 414 years. This places this alignment of planets within the Phoenix chronology. For 414 years is three 138-year Phoenix orbits. The Great Flood in 2239 BC will be the 2070th year of the Phoenix chronology, or 207 times 10. Whether a five-planet alignment occurred or not, this is further evidence that the ancient Chinese had access to accurate pre-flood timelines. Noah was 393 years old. This was the 83rd year of the reign of Dumuzi. 1. The Great Pyramid, its divine message. 2429 BC, 1466 AM. This is the 400th year of the Bud Tabira dynasty of metalworkers, and its last, ending with the reign of Dumuzi. The fifth Nephilim king is Ensi-Pazianna, who had reigned for 28,800 shahs, evenings and mornings, or 80 years. This begins the Archaix dynasty, a city of giants. This is 1296 years, 108 times 12, after the start of the Sethite dynasty in 3725 BC. The entire length of the Anunnaki chronology is based off of periods of 60 and 600 years, and we see this is true with Anunnaki history as well. 480 years before the Archaix dynasty was founded was 2909 BC, when the Anunnaki matriarch founded her own dynasty over the Cainites in 2909 BC. 480 years is 60 times 8. The Jewish calendar has this as 1242, or three cursed earth periods of 414 years each. The Genesis record in chapter 6 related that, "And there were giants in the earth in those days, the offspring of the Anunnaki, angels, and human females. These were called the Nephilim, meaning the fallen ones." This new government is reflected by the fact that this was 476 years after foundation of Great Pyramid is built, the number 476 signifying a change in government that will be shown over and over throughout this research. 2415 BC, 1480 AM. This year is added to Chronicon because it figures very prominently more than once in the chronometry of the Great Pyramid, a very significant year. This was 490 years, 70 times 7, from the foundation laid to the Great Pyramid. It was the 424th year of the life of Noah. This is the 14th year of the reign of Ensi-Pazianna of Archaix. 2377 BC, 1518 AM. Planet Phoenix passes through the inner system, completing its 138-year orbit on its way back out to the Kuiper belt. This is its last pass before appearing at the Great Flood. 2359 BC, 1536 AM. Noah is 480 years old when he received a divine commission from God to warn the people of the coming flood, to repent that they can be saved. The Great Flood is now decreed, and the salvation being offered is spiritual. God has determined to destroy the earth. Mankind is given 120 years. At the Sumerian city of Shuruppak, Noah gathers all the records of his forefathers, the secret writings of the Sethites, histories and prophecies, and preserves them. Noah is chosen to survive the flood with his family because he is perfect in his generations, meaning that he is 100% Sethite, therefore Adamic, with no Cainite or Nephilim influence in his bloodline, the latter being degenerate hybrids not made in the image of God. The scriptural records on this warning are in Genesis and Jasher. The Atrahasis record indicates that at this time humanity filled the earth with their noise and corruption, troubling the heavens. By this time the Creator had severed communication between the heavens and the rebellious Anunnaki. They were given Phoenix as a sign and witness in the heavens of his plans, and on earth they were given the Sphinx and Great Pyramid complex.
But now the Anunnaki had to rely on inspired humans to know the times, to understand God's plans because they had fallen from their first estate. For this reason did Enoch interact with the Anunnaki and Nephilim without harm. Though he pronounced judgments against them, he was their link to the mind of God. Banished from the heavens, they succeeded in banishing humanity from paradise and divine protection. But the prophets, the elect and spiritually powerful, they had to rely on for knowledge. For this reason we see the calendrics indicate that this warning was also to the Anunnaki and their Nephilim offspring, a judgment decreed. This was 4464 years before Armageddon, when the Anunnaki will be defeated and confined by the chief cornerstone, the stone they rejected. This 4464 years is 744 times 6, and the year Noah was warned was the 744th year since the Vedic calendar began, the Black Age caused by the Anunnaki. This was the 480th year of the oppression of the Sethites, or 8 60-year periods. The connection to Enoch is made more profound by the fact that this was the 792nd year, orbit of Nibiru, since Enoch was made emperor in 3151 BC, the year 744 Annus Mundi. This was the 70th year of the reign of the Nephilim king Ensi-Paziana. 1. Genesis. Jasher. Flying serpents and dragons. 2. Atrahasis.
2357 BC, 1538 AM. According to Chinese traditional history in the Book of Myriad Things, the Emperor Yao ascended to the throne in this year, some antiquarians claiming that this begins the historical period for ancient China. This date is only 2 years off from the 120-year warning given to Noah in 2359 BC, and further, the title Yao is akin to the ancient Semitic name for God, Yah-Jah. Noah in the Sumerian records was a king of the city of Shuruppak, and what strongly links this Yao to a Chinese Noah is that in the reign of Yao there occurred a terrible flood. 1. Feats and wisdom of the ancients. 2. The antediluvian world. 2349 BC, 1546 AM. The sixth king of the Nephilim dynasty is Enmendurana, who would reign 21,000 shahs, evenings and mornings, or 58 years, 120 days. This ends the Larak dynasty that lasted 80 years and begins the Sipar dynasty. Sipar is a metropolis and centre of learning and science, housing a famous pre-flood library that the later Sumerians after the flood would excavate. It is from these records that Noah retrieves the writings he is instructed to preserve. This is 490 years, 70 by 7, since the founding of the Anunnaki dynasty in 2839 BC, an 870-year period since the Anunnaki matriarch began to rule the Cainites in 2909 BC. This is the 480th year of the seven kings of Sumer, who began to rule in 2829 BC, the Nephilim dynasty. 2341 BC, 1554 AM. Noah married the daughter of Enoch, prophet emperor. Her name is Naamah, and she was 580 years old. She is stunningly beautiful and destined to be the oldest living person on earth after the flood, she being 82 years Noah's senior. Before the flood, Naamah was chosen because she was the daughter of Enoch, being perfect in her generations. But after the flood, Naamah would become infamous. Noah and Naamah's unions marked the beginning of the end for the Nephilim dynasty offspring of the Anunnaki, and this is reflected in the Anunnaki chronology, the year being 2898 or 414 times 7, 7 cursed periods. Further, the Vedic calendar, also an Anunnaki timeline, has this as 762, the number for dynastic change. In this year, the human family has its origin through the Noahic and Enochian lines, both of Sethite ancestry, purely Adamic. Noah is 498 years old, 1 Jasher. 2339 BC, 1556 AM. Naamah gives birth to Japheth, the firstborn son of Noah, 100 years before the flood. After Noah's death after the flood, Japheth will be the oldest male on earth. The ancient Indo-Aryan peoples remembered Japheth as Prajapati and Iapetus.
the origin for the Roman god Jupiter. Old Arabic traditions hold that the sexual maturity for a female before the deluge was approximately at 200 years. The world before the flood is fully detailed in Descent of the Seven Kings. The biospheric conditions on Earth before the collapse of the marine water canopy in the sky, firmament above, that caused the flood, were very different, and human longevity was not abbreviated as it is today. During those pristine conditions, according to many ancient chroniclers, Josephus among them, life was lived in the centuries, not decades. Before the flood, people aged but did not physically grow any older in appearance. Once a man reached maturity, he remained physically in that form until death. The wrinkles of the skin and greying hair of the elderly then was not known to the ancients. This year was the 476th year since the Great Pyramid was complete. As will be seen throughout this research, the number 476 is found over and over throughout the duration of all timelines, dealing with the descendants of Japheth, even after the Semitic lines from Shem merged with the lineage. This number signifies a change in government. This is the 490th year, 70 times 7, of the Nephilim dynasty founded in 2829 BC. This is the 90th year of the reign of Enmenjurana, or 1080 months. 1. Genesis, Jasher. 2. Tales of the Prophets. 2338 BC, 1557 AM. Namar gives birth to Ham 99 years before the flood, Noah's second son. He will be remembered in antiquity as Chem, Chemis, Ammon, Hama, Hammon, Anom, Anan, and He is the patriarch of the Hamitic line, peoples that populate Egypt, Africa, and Australia, as well as parts of India and Cambodia and Central America, known anciently as the Olmec. 1. Jasher. 2337 BC, 1558 AM. Namar gives birth to Shem 98 years before the flood, Noah's third son. Shem is the 11th in descent of the 10 patriarchs of the Adamic lineage through Seth, these being the unpolluted generations not contaminated with Cainite or Nephilim influence. Shem would be the patriarch of the Semitic branches of humanity that would preserve the scarlet thread, holy bloodline, through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 13 tribes of Israel who would merge with the Japhetic lines and become major nations and empires. This is 776, the Mayan calendar, the number 776 throughout history, exhibiting the union between Japhetic and Shemitic people as prophesied by Noah in Genesis. 1. Jasher, Genesis. 2335 BC, 1560 AM. The Sumerian king list records that Etana Enoch ruled for 1560 years before the flood, but this is a chronological mistake. The duration of pre-flood history from man's banishment in 3895 BC was 1656 years, 414 times 4, but the 1560 discrepancy derived from the fact that 1560 is 130 months, and Enoch ruled over 130 kings and princes. The Sumerian scribes erred, however. This date does indeed appear to be significant to the Anunnaki. It is 1104 years, 552 plus 552, after the Anunnaki descended to Earth in 3439 BC, and 504 years, 6048 months is 864 times 7, after the Anunnaki dynasty began. 2325 BC, 1570 AM. Egyptian priest historian Manetho of Alexandria wrote that 10 rulers after Thoth, Enoch, reigned for 1570 years until a very chaotic period when government and historical records ceased, Great Flood. This is a fragment concerning the pre-flood world's 10 patriarchs. The same story remembered in Plato's narrative about the 10 kings of Atlantis. This old Egyptian 1570 years is similar in duration to the Sumerian king list's 1560 years. 2313 BC, 1582 AM. Second Mayun Baktun complete, 288,000 days, from start of the Mayan calendar in 3113 BC, being 800 years. This is 888 months to the Great Flood, 74 years, 888 being a golden proportion number. 2309 BC, 1586 AM. This was the 600th year since 2909 BC, when the Anunnaki matriarch established her rule over the Cainites, and 520 years, 52 times 10, after the Nephilim sons of this matriarch established their own dynasty over the Sethites. These seven called the Seven Kings. This is the 40th year of the reign of Enmandarana of Sippar, the 6th king of the Nephilim dynasty. This year begins both the giant wars and the antediluvian apocalypse. A plague afflicts the world and the earth is teeming with humans and hybrids. The Nephilim progeny of the Anunnaki, the hybrid giants, are discontent with the state of the empire, believing that the myriads of millions of humans are responsible for the food shortage. The Anunnaki hybridization programs had created races of gigantic people, too numerous to be controlled. The giants multiplied, but the Anunnaki did not. Just as the Anunnaki rebelled against their father, the Eternal One, so too did their own sons, the Nephilim, rebel against them. The apocalypse occurred during the reign of the seven kings before the flood, just as a similar apocalypse would again transpire during the reign of seven kings, Nephilim overlords, in the future, 21st century AD. Many among the giants turned to cannibalism and humans were now a food source. 2291 BC, 1604 AM. The seventh king of the Nephilim dynasty of the seven kings is Ubaratu of Shuruppak, a city that Noah had lived in. Ubaratu would reign 18,600 shahs, evenings and mornings, or 51.6 years to the Great Flood in 2239 BC. 51 years and 240 days. The 240 days of Ubaratu's reign added to the 120 days of his predecessor's reign complete the final year, 360 days. Ubaratu's reign will be cut off by the deluge, which involves planet Phoenix in 2239 BC, but as the seventh king, he will reappear in the future of the 21st century AD in the apocalypse in 2052 AD, as described in the Revelation account, where the eighth king is of the seven. In the year 2046 AD, Nibiru will nearly collide into Earth and alter its orbit around the Sun during an invasion of Anunnaki. The Revelation text relating that a third of the day and night would be reduced because Earth's spin rate is increased. Thus, the ancient 360-day year in the future after 2046 AD would become 240 days. Interestingly, the ancient Persians believed that the historic time before the flood saw the rulership of the Abad dynasty, known for avarice, murder, vice, and the total collapse of civilization. This perfectly reflects the Revelation account, which calls this seventh king Abaddon. He is the destroyer. The Jewish calendar seems to embody this wickedness, in that 1380 is 10 orbits of Phoenix at 138 years each. This date is 52 years before the flood. 1. Round Towers of Atlantis. 2283 BC, 1612 AM. The ancient records on the golden tablets translated for King Philippus in 498 BC claim that in this year the texts upon the tablets were copied from off of the surfaces of the Great Pyramid to preserve for future posterity after the flood. This is consistent with other traditions about Noah preserving records, and many references among old writings that claimed that the surfaces of the pyramids at Giza were covered in texts. This was the 556th year of Noah, the 54th year of Shem. 1. The origin and significance of the Great Pyramid. 2281 BC, 1614 AM. The Anunnaki homeworld Nibiru reaches aphelion, far out in the Kuiper belt, the furthest distance it travels from the Sun. It was last in the inner system 366 years priorly in 2647 BC, and now begins its 366-year journey back toward the inner system below the ecliptic. 2254 BC, 1641 AM. Traditional date for the Chinese flood in which Fu He, Noah, survived. This demonstrates that the Chinese knew that Fu He lived for hundreds of years, for they believed him to have been born in 2944 BC. The Chinese date is only 15 years off, and we find here evidence that the ancient Chinese were aware about planet Phoenix, which initiated the flood disaster. They ascribe a life to Fu He of 690 years, 2944 to 2254 BC. 690 being 5 orbits of Phoenix at 138 years each. 1. The Great Pyramid, its divine message. 2244 BC, 1651 AM. Lamech, father of Noah, dies at age 777. Many righteous people still holding to the elder faith begin dying, the Creator allowing for the demise of those that believe in him in those days before the deluge, so that they should not see the evil which he had declared to come. Noah chooses the 3 daughters of Eliakim, the son of Methuselah, who is the son of Enoch, to marry his 3 sons, Japheth, Shem, and Ham. These were Enoch's granddaughters, and Noah was married to Naamah, Enoch's daughter. Because of escalating violence, Noah moved his family to a place appointed in the wilderness to escape the giants, Nephilim. God instructs him on the designs of a massive wooden structure designed to float, a ship, and Noah begins the 5-year-long project. Noah is commanded to make the ark the length of 300 cubits, the breadth of 50 cubits, and the height of 30 cubits. The architectural dimensions of the ark are no different than those of the Great Pyramid, encoding chronometrical timelines relative to mankind. The ancient royal cubit equals 20 pyramid inches, each pyramid inch being a year within the chronometrical timelines. Thus, 300 cubits is 6,000 years, the duration between man's banishment in 3895 BC to his redemption in 2106 AD. The width of the ark at 50 cubits was 1,000 pyramid inches, a millennium, exactly 1/6 the length of the ark, 6 being the number of man. The height of the structure at 30 cubits was 600 pyramid inches, a great year or Anunnaki Ner, the age of Noah when the flood occurred. The Great Pyramid is the height of a 40-story building at 5448 pyramid inches, or 454 pyramid feet, but the ark is 6,000 pyramid inches longer, and if stood on end it would be 552 inches higher than the Great Pyramid. The flood occurs at the end of a 552-year cycle in the Phoenix chronology, and the subterranean chamber width under the Great Pyramid is 552 inches. The ark had 3 decks and was so capacious that it could carry the loads of 500 railroad boxcars. Noah is remembered as the Sumerian Utnapishtim, Xusuthrus of Babylon, Manu of ancient India in Sanskrit and Vedic texts, Bochica of early America, Deucalion of Greece, New Wine Sailor, and Nereus in the Aegean, Fuhi of China, and Koch in Mexico. 1 Genesis, 2 Jasher, 4 Josephus, Antiquities, Book 1. 2239 BC, 1656 AM. This is the year of the Great Flood, an event remembered by every culture on this planet. There has been recorded over 1,000 flood traditions, and their similarities are very stunning. The oldest Mesopotamian tablet inscriptions found, the Karsag tablets, describe the flood. Hebrew and Jewish tradition relate that the deluge occurred in the 1656 year of the pre-flood calendar, as we see here in the Annus Mundi dating. Augustine, over 16 centuries ago, wrote that the flood occurred in the year 1656. This sum, 1656, is 12 orbits of planet Phoenix at 138 years each, or 4 cursed Earth periods at 414 years each. 1656 is also 3 Phoenix cycles of 552 years each. The flood disaster is mentioned famously by Pindar, Ovid of Rome, Lucian, Apollodorus, among many others. The Chinese believe that the Great Flood actually marked and caused a major division in time itself. The calendrics for this terrible year bear this out. This is the 3000th year of the Anunnaki chronology, a year when judgment is executed against them and their Nephilim offspring, which are killed off the face of the earth. 3,000 years is 5 great years of 600 years. This was the 2070th year since the destruction of the pre-Adamic world, or 15 orbits of Phoenix at 138 years each, or 414 times 5 years. Since Earth entered its new orbit around the Sun in 4039 BC, it had been 1800 years, or 600 times 3. From 3439 BC, when the Anunnaki descended to Earth at the Passover of Nibiru, it had been 1200 years, or 600 times 2, 432,000 days. This was 600 years after the reign of the 7 kings began the Anunnaki dynasty over the Sethites. Thus Noah was 600 years old, and his wife Namah 682. The Anunnaki matriarch began her rule over the Cainites 670 years earlier in 2909 BC, and the Sethites laid the foundation for the Great Pyramid, which was designed to survive the deluge 666 years earlier in 2905 BC. The Giza complex was finished 576 years, 144 times 4 before the flood. The Black Age of the Kali Yuga, having begun in 3103 BC, saw the rise of the Nephilim powers of the Anunnaki and decay of spirituality. The flood ended the total presence of Anunnaki and Nephilim hybrids on Earth, as the flood cleansed the planet of their pollution, reflected in that the deluge was the year 864, foundation of time number, implying a beginning of the Vedic calendar. 7 days before the deluge, planet Phoenix was seen entering the inner solar system, growing larger and larger in the sky from the direction of Venus. Phoenix transited between the Earth and the Sun, casting our planet in shadow, darkening the Sun. The world turned upside down, night turned to day and day to night, and destructive earthquakes shook the foundations, crustal plates of the world. The Tractate Sanhedrin 108b reads that 7 days before the flood the sun set in the east and rose in the west, and the Book of Enoch also mentions a pole shift and quakes at the flood. The Babylonian records called the Archaix epic reads that for 7 days and 7 nights the torrent, storms and flood came on. In the Persian Zend-Avesta texts, the flood was associated with the sudden appearance of a strange star. Before the 7 days began, Noah had loaded the ark with all the necessary water and provisions. The ancient book of Jasher relates that the Creator caused animals of mammalian and some avian species to gather around the superstructure, and they allowed Noah and his sons to take their cubs and young into the pens of the ark. Noah just finished collecting the pups and cubs and livestock when people began gathering around the ark. He shut his family inside of it, and as it began raining, about 700,000 people surrounded the ark. But the people were refused admittance, and rioted when Noah reminded them of the years of his preaching and prophesying that they had ignored. The masses of enraged and panicked men and women assaulted the structure in what became the Battle of the Ark. The Jasher records indicates that God enraged the hearts of the animals that had delivered their young, and thousands of wild animals set upon the rioting people. Mighty men, giants Nephilim, vicious women and angry men fought to enter the ark, but the sons of Noah from atop the structure fought them valiantly, while the animals and the people fought one another. The storms increased and they flee to find shelter. Sumerian records attest that just prior to the 40 days of non-stop rain, the entire world shook violently, and the far horizon turned black with clouds. Rabbinical records indicate that the deluge was caused by the falling of 2 stars. These 2 impacts mirror what is described in the Revelation account during the Apocalypse. See 2046 AD and 2048 AD. Phoenix transits between Venus and the Earth, which led to much ancient confusion. We have records from archaic chroniclers that they thought Venus was responsible for the catastrophes that all occur with the Phoenix orbit years. These will be seen in 1687 BC. The meteoric impacts that caused the flood were not fragments from Phoenix, which merely blankets the Earth in millions of tons of cosmic dust, darkening the Sun in an envelope, but from the ancient Earth-killer comet group. This comet group originally fractured off of Nibiru and entered its own orbit of the Sun of 396 years, half of Nibiru's orbit, just finishing its 330 years below the ecliptic on its elliptical orbit. Now it begins its 66-year, 792-month journey over the ecliptic. As the past is a predicate for the future, the sun darkening of Phoenix precedes the impact of two gigantic meteoric objects, just as described in the prophetic biblical records. An analysis of Chinese traditions using royal chronologies places Emperor Shun in 2240 BC, 1 year off from 2239, witnessing a large meteorite falling from the sky to strike the earth, followed by the Great Flood. Bruce Massey, an environmental archaeologist with the US Air Force, revealed that the ancient world was plagued by a series of cosmic impacts, with one being approximately 2240 BC. Ocean sediments taken from the Gulf of Oman revealed a sudden deterioration of a long stable climate approximately 2200 BC. French scientists in the Middle East discovered layers of calcite under the ground, indicating a cosmic impact dating around 2200 BC. Earthquakes and strange electrical storms rage as the heavens seem to spin end over end, as Earth rolls without actual stability. Noxious gases and chemicals poison the world, killing many, and the basement rock, foundations of Earth, are broken, and the entire surface of the crust is rippled with new mountains and valleys, and cities of the world are buried in violent subsidence. Pillars of lava are thrust high into the air as boiling water spews up from below the ground, towering geysers that burn thousands and thousands of square miles. Volcanic resurfacing occurs and the rains continue through it all. The marine atmosphere, a thick water vapour canopy that made the biospheric conditions on pre-flood Earth so unique, collapses. The source of the rainwater that caused the flood was never terrestrial. In fact, the planet enjoyed a surface sea or seas and a literal ocean above, called in Genesis the firmament. The firmament magnified the heavens like a lens, allowing the ancients a better view of the heavens, to see the planets closer up. In fact, the planet Venus, Jupiter and Saturn still have these vapour canopies. Had not a large celestial body penetrated the upper mesosphere at the exact same time that Phoenix exerted a powerful gravitational pull on Earth's outer atmospheric levels at the instant of direct transit between Earth and the Sun, the marine mesosphere would still be in place, and the stars and planets of the night sky would be much larger. The Great Flood was the first time mankind had ever experienced rain. Rain was never necessary in the antediluvian biosphere because the mesosphere and subterranean water table, according to Genesis 2, caused a mist to water the face of the earth every morning and evening. The mesosphere took 40 days to fall completely to the earth. With internal core pressure intensified by the proximity of Phoenix, which is several times the mass of Earth, the subterranean water reservoirs boiled upward over the land at the same time the mesosphere drained the atmosphere of its watery firmament. The waters of the flood are still with us today, having accumulated at the poles covering Antarctica in a 2-mile-high ice cap and the North Pole, some mixing in with Earth's oceans and precipitation cycle. Every time that it rains on Earth, some of these water molecules were existent when they had fallen out of the sky in 2239 BC. The greatest impact was that of the Chicxulub crater that carved out the bowl of the Gulf of Mexico, an impact zone on the opposite side of the world from where pre-flood civilization was centered, in the land we call Egypt today. Chicxulub is the devil's tail in the Yucatan of Central America. The Anunnaki, having taken on physical bodies that they cannot escape out of now, are imprisoned by the Godhead, those having descended to sexually unite with the daughters of men. Their progeny, the Nephilim, hybrids and giants, are obliterated from off the face of the earth. The scribe of Jeremiah the prophet, named Baruch, wrote in what is now called Baruch, "These were the giants, famous from the beginning, that were of so great stature and so expert in war. Those did not the Lord choose, neither gave he the way of knowledge unto them. But they were drowned because they had no wisdom. and perish through their own foolishness. A global ocean is created and the ark is lifted in the waters, megalithic anchor stones keeping it from listing. The former surface layers of the planet are scrambled, and much is reconstituted according to weight and density, with billions of dead people, Nephilim hybrids, giants, animals from land and sea, deposited in the deepening water and buried as immense pressure from radioactive materials boil the oceans and entomb dead bodies in many layers. The saturated carcass-strewn sediments are cooked under these conditions, which burn the effects of the flood into the fictitious geologic column. The old world has been turned into a planetary fossil of a former global ecosystem that had not known Arctic poles nor seasonal changes, but was a virtual year-round greenhouse. A Babylonian record reads, "All mankind was turned to mud. The whole world was destroyed exactly 2070 years, 414 times 5, after, and was totally destroyed and frozen in 4309 BC. The two planetary cataclysms and their sedimentation effects has given rise to the fiction of the Jurassic fantasy of millions of years ago. The prehistoric age of the dinosaurs was not 65 million years ago, and the scientific testing of radioactive materials and their decay rates does not take into account the contamination of radioactivity that occurred in 4309, 2239 BC, and other disasters of interplanetary origin. Prior to the Great Flood, the planet was more spherical than it is today. The crust of the planet was not fractured into plates as it is today. The Earth was literally broken at the flood, and the equatorial bulge was formed from the immense stress and pressure. The 7920-mile diameter of the planet became 7925 miles, and the planet no longer spun around a perfect 90-degree axis, as do the other planets closer to the Sun. Earth's axis was tilted at 23 degrees inclined toward the ecliptic. Intriguingly, this 23-degree tilt reflects the history of the Earth's precessional motion. Because the retrogression of the precession of the equinox is 1 degree every 72 years, in the year 2239 BC, 1656 AM, the Earth has gone backward a total of 23 degrees, 1656 years, since man's banishment from paradise in 3895 BC. The tilt of the Earth now supports the maintenance of the polar caps, and is the reason the world experiences seasonal changes, a fact unknown to the pre-flood greenhouse. The Genesis record of the Great Flood provides us another source of proof that the years in the antediluvian world were reckoned at 360 days. We are told therein that the flood lasted 5 months, and that these 5 months were 150 days. This reveals a 30-day month, 12 of which would be a year, 360 days. More amazing archaeological and scientific proof of the deluge will be found throughout this research. 1. Catastrophobia. 2. City of God. 3. Pindar. 4. Metamorphosis. 5. Lucian. De Dea Syra. 6. Apollodorus. Lib. 1. 7. The Great Pyramid, its divine message. 8. Jasher. 9. Enoch. 10. History in quotations. 11. History of the Christian religion. 12. Jasher. 13. Chronology of Genesis 1. 14. The Natural Genesis Volume 2. 15. Survivors of Atlantis. 18. Atlantis and the Kingdom of the Neanderthals. 19. The Incredible Discovery of Noah's Ark. 20. Baruch. 21. The Antediluvian World. 22. Genesis. After the Flood, beginning of the Old Bronze Age. 2238 BC, 1657 AM. The Great Flood over, water covering the entire world for almost a year, the planet baptized. The Ark comes to rest at the summit of Mount Ararat in modern Turkey, at over 12,000 feet elevation today. Through the course of human history, men will visit the secluded site and see the Herculean structure many times. The structure is encased in a solid glacial cap, has been studied, photographed, and even been the subject of US intelligence reports. These details will be found throughout this research. The waters of the deluge were dried up in the 601st year, the first month, the first day of the month. The very moment another great year of 600 years began. Enoch had been told by God long before that there would be survivors of the flood, that all the sons of men shall not perish in consequence of every secret by which the watchers have destroyed, and which they have taught their offspring. Every human survivor was a descendant of Enoch. Noah was the great-grandson of Enoch through Methuselah and Lamech. Naamah, Noah's wife, was the daughter of Enoch. The three sons of Noah were married to the three daughters of Eliakim, son of Methuselah, son of Enoch. Chronicon, Archive 2, Post-Flood Antiquity, 2238 to 800 BCE. 1438 years covered in 207 date entries in 81 pages. Original research unpublished. All rights reserved. JasonArchaix, 2017. After the flood, beginning of the Old Bronze Age. 2238 BC, 1657 AM. The Great Flood over, water covering the entire world for almost a year. The planet baptized. The Ark comes to rest at the summit of Mount Ararat in modern Turkey, at over 12,000 feet elevation today. Through the course of human history, men will visit the secluded site and see the Herculean structure many times. The structure is encased in a solid glacial cap, has been studied, photographed, and even been the subject of US intelligence reports. These details will be found throughout this research. The waters of the deluge were dried up in the 601st year, the first month, the first day of the month, the very moment another great year of 600 years began. Enoch had been told by God long before that there would be survivors of the flood, that all the sons of men shall not perish in consequence of every secret by which the watchers have destroyed, and which they have taught their offspring. Every human survivor was a descendant of Enoch. Noah was the great-grandson of Enoch through Methuselah and Lamech. Naamah, Noah's wife, was the daughter of Enoch. The three sons of Noah were married to the three daughters of Eliakim, son of Methuselah, son of Enoch. 1. Our sun God, Christianity before Christ. 2. Enoch.